This guy was making his way through a dark dungeon fleeing from monsters when he suddenly stumbled upon a treasure chest. Hoping to find something useful, he rushed to open it, but instead of a treasure, a surprise was waiting for him, a dark slime. It jumped right onto his face and forced its way inside his head through his mouth and eyes. It was an incredible pain that lasted until his eye exploded. When he regained consciousness in the place where his old eye was, there was a completely different one. A black eye known as the Eye of Superbia. With this eye, he gained immense power, enhanced supervision, and incredible reaction speed. After killing at least one enemy with that eye, he will never lose, not even against a group of enemies weaker than him. Once he has killed one, he will be unstoppable. This guy is the hero of our story. Huyun is a novelist who writes a light novel in which the villain of the story is destined to die. One day, just after finishing the last chapter of his novel, he receives a kind of letter that transmigrates him into his own story in the body of the villain himself, whose tragic fate he himself wrote. After the transmigration, Huyun finds himself lying in a bed, completely disoriented. He doesn't recognize his surroundings, and even his body feels different. When he gets up and looks in the mirror, he notices some disturbingly familiar features: that ominous crimson hair, that cunning mouth, and those slit eyes that don't show a hint of emotion. It's then that it hits him like a ton of bricks he has possessed someone else's body. And that person is Arsenadel, the most powerful villain in his novel. The problem is that there are only a few days until he is murdered. But before we get into all that, here's some context about this villain. Basically, the Arsen family has mixed blood, part demon, part human, thanks to the demonic powers in their bloodline. They were once one of the most powerful families in the Empire, but they fell from grace due to 6 families, specific families that united to destroy them. With that context, it's pretty clear why Adele chose to walk the path of a villain. He tried to get revenge on the families that ruined his, but he failed spectacularly. That is precisely why the original Adele summoned the novel's creator in the first place. In just a few days, Adele will die, like a dog at the hands of knights from those 6 families. And here comes the twist in terms of talent. Adele is one of the most gifted characters in the entire novel. His abilities even surpass the protagonists, but no matter how powerful the villain is, Huyun wrote the story so that he could never defeat the main character no matter what. Even worse, currently Adele can't even use his mana. If Huyun had known that the restrictions he placed on Adele would come back to bite him, he would have never written such a doomed narrative. Everything is completely stacked against the villain. While cursing his bad luck, Huyun notices a letter identical to the one that brought him to this world. It turns out to be a letter left by the original Adele for Huyun. Bro, he hopes it contains some useful clue to start with. But the paper is completely blank, literally not a single word. Then suddenly, letters begin to appear. Letters on the page as if by magic. The sentence that appears is a message from the original Adele to his creator. If Huyun wants to know how to use the powers this body contains, Adele wants him to answer with a simple yes or no. Of course, Huyun starts cursing, again, when he realizes he is actually speaking directly with Adele, the very one who dragged him into this mess. The paper insists he answer with a yes or no. Finally, Bro gives in and says yes. Now that Huyun is on board, Adele explains that he will answer anything his creator writes on that paper. Some questions will be free, but others will have a price. The more important the question, the higher the cost. Naturally, Huyun gets straight to the point and asks the big question: how to return to his original world. Adele immediately replies that it's impossible. Well, Huyun pretty much figured as much, so he was prepared for the bad news. He then asks a more practical question: how to use mana and how to activate Adele's unique skills. It turns out that question has no cost. Adele directly imprints the knowledge into Huyun's mind. The instant it happens, Huyun starts to feel the mana flowing through his body. The first trait of Adele's body is the ability to take away someone's 5 senses, called darkness. The second is the power to immobilize opponents using aura, called killing intent. When Huyun activates it, he can feel it working. At least that cheers him up a bit. Now he can immobilize common people, though not yet trained knights or soldiers. The last great skill he needs to learn is the most broken of all, Position Transfer 1, as its name suggests. This skill literally allows him to swap places with an object of his choice. Basically, it's the ultimate move for assassinations. The moment he activates it, a kind of strange magic occurs, which is a clear sign that the power really works. But it's not that impressive yet. For now, he can only swap within a radius of 20 square yards, which is a bit disappointing compared to Adele's powers in the original story. Still, if he practices every day, he'll get better. So, he decides to test it by swapping places with a nearby suit of armor. As soon as he activates it, he disappears from his spot, and the armor appears in his place. The swap is successful, but the guy doesn't land very well. It seems he just needs more practice. Meanwhile, a group of knights is marching straight to his residence, ready to claim his life at the Arsen family's property. Those knights finally reach their destination, representing the county of Leon. With a determined look, Captain Feld learns from Adele's servants that the villain is resting in his room. The servants are worried because Adele hasn't moved in days and is locked up. Without waiting any longer, Fels and his men burst in and confront their target, who is casually enjoying himself while commenting on the captain's brutal mission to eliminate a young man. Without listening to a single word, Fels simply orders his men to eliminate him immediately. But they weren't prepared for our protagonist's position transfer skill, which allows him to swap places with any object within a set radius. By targeting the sword of the knight who is about to attack him, he activates the skill and lunges forward with the knight's sword in hand. His unexpected attack hits its mark, slashing his opponent and surprising both Fels and his men. Stepping back after his first kill, the villain simply waits for the next one who dares to mess with him. Fels still seems confident because of the number of men he has and orders a direct attack. The battle begins, but instead of facing them recklessly, Adele shatters a window and jumps out, using a clever application of his skill. First, he throws his sword to the ground. Then he activates Position Transfer just in time to swap places with the sword. This allows him to avoid fall damage and escape safely. The next step is to get to the Arsen family's forest. As he heads into the forest, Feld orders his men to pursue him to confirm his elimination. We switch perspectives to the Arsen forest, where our protagonist is running and panting, his legs doing their best to gain as much distance as they can. The thing is, even if he manages to escape this territory, he knows that the only thing waiting for him ahead is death, which is why, instead of escaping the territory, he plans to use the gate in the forest to access the demonic realm. The demonic realm suffered huge losses from the war against the humans, so he hopes they will accept him in this time of need, even though he is a human himself. However, that was his initial plan because Feld and his knights are already there, quickly spreading out to search for him. Luckily, the villain is still hidden, but he's having a hard time finding the exact location of the gate. He has a rough idea of where it might be, but stepping on a dry branch draws attention with the noise. Felds is no longer playing games, and unleashes his immense power to destroy everything in his path. He has finally located his target, which is bad news for our protagonist, especially since he only has 2 more uses of position transfer left. His priority is to find the gate instead of fighting, but at this point, the author inside Adele's body starts to feel anxious, so he consults with the true spirit of Adele and asks for the gate's location. Since it's secret knowledge, it comes with a price. 100 gold coins or a special relic of a certain rank or higher. The author is furious, because he has to negotiate something like this in the middle of a life or death trial. Unfortunately, Feld's last attack hits our protagonist, sending him flying into a tree. On the ground, the ruthless captain readies his sword, asking if the villain really thought he could live just by running for his life. With a chilling smile on his face, Feld promises that Adele will meet his end today. Despite being injured, the young man replies confidently. He didn't know much about anything except for one thing. He was determined to survive, realizing he's already on the verge of death anyway. Adele gets up to use one last measure against his opponent. Feld finds his persistence annoying, although he respects the half-demon for maintaining his pride as the patriarch of his family. In response, Adele reminds him that knights like the captain and his men shouldn't even feel a shred of dignity when they are ganging up on a child, but he basically signs his own death warrant. by telling Felds to change his profession and become a babysitter. Yeah, that's gonna need a ton of ice for that burn. Completely provoked, the captain points his sword at the target, coldly declaring that he will no longer hesitate to be ruthless with his blade. He plans to make sure the sword pierces the boy's heart. Felds lunges to deliver the killing blow, not knowing that this exact moment was what our protagonist was waiting for. He takes out the special note he uses to communicate with Adele and makes it come into contact with Felds' sword. You might not fully understand this. Our protag is so smart that he used the special artifact of his opponent as the price to get the answer to his question. He achieves his goal and gets rid of Felds' weapon at the same time. Adele has that "I tricked you" bro smile, as the captain's sword disintegrates into nothingness to everyone's surprise. The location of the demonic gate is revealed as a reward for the artifact, and so our protag uses position transfer again to get away. Felds tries to stop him, but the incompetent captain simply lost his chance. The villain escapes to find his special gate. He finally finds the door emanating red tentacles of dark energy. Adele has achieved his goal, but this Felds guy is like a damn cockroach. He throws a huge log at him just as it's about to make contact with his head, and he activates the last use of his position transfer, promising to see the captain again someday. Felds is frustrated because his target escaped to the demon realm, a place where only darkness awaits him. Some time passes, and we see Adele sitting alone, chewing on a piece of jerky. He wonders how much time has passed since he successfully crossed the gate and entered the dungeon. This dungeon was actually created by humans using secret demonic arts. Now he's surprised to find jerky and a bed placed there. Adele wonders if this place was intentionally used to protect some kind of treasure. There is also a special barrier that deflects any blade coming at it. Furthermore, there's a stone guardian, which only makes the origin of this artificial dungeon more mysterious. The stone guardian looks creepy on its own, and even Adele knows that if he crosses the barrier to face it, he'll literally get slapped, so he's not going to try that. Finally, the special note lights up as Adele's true spirit communicates with the author, warning him of a penalty for manipulating the rules of the price. This is because he tried to use Felds' sword as a sacrifice. That trick won't work anymore from this point on. But even the author thinks it was insane that he was able to use it at all, and on top of that, he wasn't even punished for it. Suddenly, the author's attention turns to a stone that looks different from the rest on the wall. By interacting with it, he realizes that only thanks to Adele's powers can he perceive certain things. An authoritative voice responds to his interaction with the stone, telling him that he does not possess the right to use that function. Our guy strongly suspects that this stone must be the key to deactivating the barrier. Since he can't use it, he plans to find another way past it. He sees a stone that likely fell from the Stone Guardian's body. Even though it's just a rock, it might be useful, in this case, activating his position transfer ability. The author swaps places with the piece of rock, getting out safely without needing to activate the function. But the guy is so thrilled with his achievement that he completely forgets about the demonic stone dragon that was outside. The creature roars in his face, alerting him to be on his guard. The scene shifts to the demon castle in the realm, where the patriarch of the bear family named Crate observes his servants working busily. He comments that it is probably due to his daughter's attempted raid, that his people are working overtime. Creed doesn't know how to handle the situation. The issue is that if his daughter succeeds, she is granted the right to enter Satan, which is supposed to be a demon school, and even though he orders her strictly to fail, she will rebel against his decision anyway. After all, his daughter is fully determined to achieve her goal of getting revenge on the murderous humans who killed her mother. Wow. That's a truly tragic burden for a girl her age. Anyway, her dad is worried that she might get crushed in a ruthless demon school. Suddenly, one of his maids arrives to inform him of some trouble. Creed is visibly annoyed at being interrupted in his thoughts. The maid apologizes fearfully and informs her master that there's news about an unknown person in the hidden domain. They have located several traces of that person's energy from the gate being opened, which is causing great confusion. Furthermore, their identity remains unknown. The only thing they know is that this person tried to interact with the gate's function from the inside. This puts the demon patriarch in a state of contemplation, wondering if that human was summoned through the demon gate during the Great War, believing that this pest will die anyway. He thinks it's an insignificant matter for now. All he cares about is his daughter's exam going well. Creed is amused considering the possibility of getting a pawn from the human side if things go his way. Anyway, let's get back to our MC, who instantly regretted his decision to leave the domain and teleported back inside for his own good. Clearly, the guy didn't expect a damn wolf to devour him alive. The creature watches him from the outside as Adele realizes how bad his situation is, even if he manages to break the barrier. He will only put himself in even greater danger. Suddenly, Adele has a revelation. The wolf creature is made of stone. That means his ability might work on it. Activating the position transfer again, he forces the target to be the stone wolf outside the barrier. His plan works astonishingly well, trapping the monster inside and freeing him from the barrier's reach. The wolf takes a moment to realize it's trapped, and despite its multiple attempts, it can't get through the barrier. Adele runs to find a way out, when he suddenly runs into another terrifying creature from the abyss. He quickly realizes that there's a mission on each level, and that this huge insect is even more threatening than the wolf he just escaped from. The funny thing is that Adele keeps abusing his transferability of position with the creatures, trapping the monsters again and again. It's thanks to their inanimate nature that he can abuse his powers to the fullest. Having finally reached the final stage of the hidden domain, a voice speaks to him, congratulating him for reaching the final obstacle. Surprisingly, it's a warm welcome, especially for a human like Adele. Adele deduces that this must be the boss room, and what he sees is truly terrifying. A Death Knight emitting a dark aura and showing off its immaculate armor from the force emanating from its body. Adele compares its power to that of Captain Feld's, but he isn't even bothered to converse with the Death Knight and starts spamming the use of his position transfer skill before the boss monster can even finish his sentence. The poor guy gets trapped inside the barrier. Adele moves forward and finds the treasure chest he was looking for. It's different from what he expected, as he didn't imagine it would have a special ornament engraved on it. This black dragon ornament represents the highest-ranking demonic families. Among them are those of sloth, lust, gluttony, wrath, envy, and finally greed. The black dragon symbol represents the bear family, denoting the sin of pride. It is also the same family that leads Creed. Of course, this revelation alone represents a threat to our MC's existence. He tries his luck and opens the box, hoping to find a way to escape. All he cares about for now is getting out of the demon realm, but to his horror, a shadowy mist emerges from the box and attacks his face. The dark energy forces its way inside him. Unable to withstand the dark energy, Adele roars in pain as his human body experiences extreme agony. The consequence seems brutal, hinting that his head exploded into 1,000 pieces, but apparently that's not what happened, because he wakes up later and is fine. His eye changed when the black liquid attacked him and gave him the Eye of Superbia, a special eye ability that enhances his dynamic vision, and it only activates after killing an enemy. Now, the bro thinks he's unstoppable because he can take on dozens of enemies at once. He's impressed with his decision to come to the demon realm, and from here on out, he prepares for whatever comes next. In front of the chest is a huge door. Adele wonders how he should act, since there will surely be a ton of forces waiting outside to capture him. Going out practically ensures his death, so he has to think of another way. He funnily imagines surrendering faster than light, but that's not going to work either. The problem right now is that he belongs to the Arsen family, and the moment the demons find that out, they're going to kill him. That's why he decides to cover the insignia on his neck. As for the Death Knight from before, he keeps hitting his sword against the barrier and demanding to be freed. The worried Death Knight warns him that Her Highness is on the way, but of course, Adele has no idea who that is. It was at that moment that he finally understood why there were stone beds and dried meat in the hidden domain. It's because this place is a training ground used by the high-ranking families to train their children. It's important for him to know what he's up against, so he immediately takes out his special note to communicate with the real Adele. The author asks who the closest character to him is right now. Once again, Adele's soul demands a sacrifice to answer that question. Unfortunately, the author is in a bind, so instead of paying with gold or artifacts, he spends 100 mana points, which is a brutal way to solve it. Finally, the answer is revealed. The closest person to Adele is the youngest daughter of the demonic patriarch of the Bear family. Our boy goes into, oh no, I'm screwed mode, because there's no way he can beat her. The Eye of Superbia he stole was supposed to be her reward for completing the training, and he literally stole that achievement from her. Since she has a ton of authority in the demonic army, Adele assumes she's going to annihilate the Stone Guardians and appear in front of him, and that's exactly what happens. Renee slices the Death Knight to pieces and confronts the human with a serious expression, demanding to know his identity. Realizing there's genuinely no way out of this, Adele surrenders by kneeling before her. In fact, he manipulates her by telling her that she successfully completed the hidden domain and became worthy, but the princess, demon princess, is genuinely annoyed and doesn't buy a single word of it, sweating bullets. Knowing he could die right then and there, the author lies to her, telling her that he's supposedly her bodyguard assigned by her father. He's also glad that she still hasn't noticed that he possesses the Eye of Superbia. With a suspicious look at the parasite in front of her, she mocks him for looking pathetically weak for a bodyguard. Adele emphasizes that he's actually quite capable despite his appearance, and starts to feel slightly optimistic about this encounter. She lowers her sword and laughs in an attempt to win his trust. Adele changes positions with his sword, surprising Renee by appearing right in front of her eyes. He does nothing to attack her, simply asking her if she was impressed by his skills. Renee grabs his hand and then yanks away. She says nothing, which leaves him confused, wondering what she thinks of him now. Trying to keep it casual, he tells her they should leave together since the patriarch is waiting for their arrival. This man is a top-tier gaslighter. My gosh. Adele also tells her that he will take care of other tasks assigned to him by her father. Inside, he knows he has to hurry and get out of there as soon as possible or he's doomed. Finally, he opens the door, which causes Renee to be startled upon seeing her father. She didn't expect him to be there with his men. Intrigued by the whole situation, Creed takes an interest in the human. Meanwhile, our MC is questioning his existence, because now he has to come up with an excuse to fool the dad as well. They're going to kill him on the spot if they find out what he's done, but for some reason, Creed hasn't lifted a finger yet. Creed addresses his daughter and asks if she completed the domain. After she confirms that she did, the patriarch asks the human to accompany him. Not knowing what awaits him, the author wonders what's about to happen. He quickly follows and can't even check his special note because he has no mana left or items to offer. Upon arriving at the Verse family mansion, Creed instructs everyone else to return to their rooms. Happy to have a chance to escape, Adele celebrates inwardly until he notices there are guards discreetly watching him in case he tries to disobey orders. In his office, Creed meets with his daughter, noting that Renee has successfully completed the final trial, but he still wants her to be sure of her decision to enter the training school. Renee is determined to go and answers that she is. Creed is silent for a moment before asking about the human she found in the reward stage. Remembering how he surprised her with his skills, Renee confirms he is strong. This pleases the patriarch, who seems excited about the mysterious human. He concludes their conversation by approving his daughter's admission to the Saiton school. As for Creed, he's not actually even thinking about his daughter, is more impressed by the human who entered the domain and completed it on his own. Not to mention, he claimed the Eye of Superbia, and yes, this basically confirms he knows our protagonist possesses it now. Renee's opinion is the strongest confirmation he could receive. All these factors point to one thing: he can use the human to his advantage. While all this is happening, our completely lost protagonist wonders how much longer he's going to have to wait for them to finish talking. He's finally given instructions to present himself in the patriarch's room. He appears before Crate, who watches him with an intimidating gaze. Adele is already scared of what's coming and wonders how he's going to handle this. The demon patriarch asks him why he was allowed to live. The patriarch cracks a smile before cursing him for having the nerve to deceive his daughter so skillfully. He also releases an overwhelming amount of aura To the point that Adele is forced to kneel before him, he realizes that the patriarch has no intention of killing him, which is an observation that Crate finds amusing. Releasing the pressure, he allows the human to regain his composure, but Adele is still panicking from what he just experienced. Crate is impressed by the human's sharp mind and asks for his name. Adele responds with his name without mentioning his family lineage. The patriarch then uses his demonic power to manipulate the human's body. At this point, our protagonist has no idea what he really wants from him. Crate orders him to open his mouth. The demon patriarch tells him that all he has to do is continue the story he was telling his daughter. As this happens, a dark energy enters the boy's mouth, choking him from the inside. Crate reminds him that the poison inside his body will kill the human instantly if he ever tries to deceive them. Adele can barely speak as he chokes on his own words, and Crate, completely calm, tells him that he will offer him a decent place to stay later on. The one-sided encounter ends with Adele speechless. In the next scene, he is shown to his new quarters. Unfortunately, Adele doesn't have many options other than to accept what he's been given in this shabby little hut. Still, he's relieved enough to have saved his life, even though he feels like he's being used as a tool. He's also glad to have earned the patriarch's recognition, which could benefit him in the long run regarding his goals. That said, the guy has to do something about the damn poison he has inside his body. Making clever use of his position transfer skill, Adele manages to force the expulsion of the inanimate poison out of his body. He doesn't even want to think about the horrors that could have happened if something else had been teleported from his body. In any case, Adele doesn't want to kill the poisonous creature, knowing that would alert the demon patriarch. The creature wakes up because its mana supply was cut off, and Adele finally collapses onto his bed, knowing he's no longer threatened by the poison. The small creature sleeps peacefully beside him. He's about to fall asleep when the status window opens, alerting him to his skill improvement. Position transfer has reached level 2. But the mana costs are too demanding. Adele wonders if there's a way to increase his mana pool so he can face the main characters of the story. He realizes there is indeed a way to achieve that effect. The scene then cuts to Renee's expressionless face, who disapproves of our protagonist's plan. For the last 3 days, he has been trying to get closer to her, but bro is getting ignored, like being left on read in real life. That's how bad it is. The author assumes she was supposed to have a brighter personality, but the loss of her mother turned her ruthless and distant. Even as the author, he feels sorry for what happened to her. The patriarch's servants call for both Adele and Renee because Craig has summoned them. Adele thinks it must be about Renee's admission to Satan's demonic school. Of course, despite having overcome the hidden domain, Satan is on another level. Craig tells his daughter that she is destined to die sooner or later, and if that happens, she will never achieve her goals. This leaves Renee with an expression of disappointment and sadness. Meanwhile, Adele feels like the typical third wheel in a conversation between a father and daughter. To the surprise of them both, the demon patriarch tasks the bodyguard with protecting his daughter, but what's truly surprising is that the girl immediately rejects the offer, which is quite funny considering she's willing to give up her own goals just to get away from our protagonist. The thing about Satan is that it's the only school where the heirs gather, promising heirs from multiple demon kingdoms, and they are in constant conflict with the protagonist's imperial school. In the original story, Renee was destined to die because of that conflict. It's the worst place on the planet, because death is always just a matter of time for the demons there. Despite that, Renee is prepared to go. For his part, Adele thinks it's the perfect place to increase his power and his network of contacts. After all, as the author, he knows the events that will happen at the school. Seizing the opportunity, Adele agrees to go, but he has one last request. He asks for something related to mana, which the patriarch finds amusing because he thought the human would try to negotiate his way out of the poison. The good thing is that Craig hasn't realized yet that Adele no longer has poison in his body. Craig curses him a bit, but considers his request. Now that they're alone, Adele wonders what the demon patriarch will offer him regarding mana. Craig reveals that that particular treasure is part of his family's legacy, so he wants this whole matter to be kept confidential. Understanding that the human's mana is basically insignificant, the demon patriarch is willing to lend him a power that will help him survive for his daughter's sake. The king channels his demonic energy and declares that he will teach the human his family's cultivation technique, which completely bewilders Adele and leaves him in shock. The demon patriarch invokes the help of the demon god to grant the powers of demons to a human. Craig's chant comes to an end, and his body is enveloped in a purple demonic energy. A smile appears on the patriarch's face, impressed that our protagonist has maintained his sanity even after receiving the power boost. Adele learns that this cultivation technique will allow him to receive mana directly from the demon god, which means he now basically has an overpowered mana storage. Interestingly, Creed has noticed that the human's family has ties to the 7 deadly sins. Although the human tries to feign ignorance, the demonic patriarch emphasizes that he isn't worried about any betrayal coming from him, since after all, the poison worm will take care of everything if he turns out to be a spy. The author is surprised to discover that the half-demon's family is connected to the 7 deadly sins, especially since he, as the writer, never included that in the original story. Creed tells him to leave, and in the next scene, we see our protagonist in the forest meditating alone. He believes this place is suitable for practicing his powers, especially when the mana can easily get out of control. Normal meditation should be something peaceful and calm, right? Well, not for this guy. He's all tense, asking the demon god for help, knowing that after this he won't be able to use human mana again. Still, he has no other choice. He has to fight for his survival. Threatening eyes watch him from the sky. The demon god considers this human a disgusting disgrace and even roars upon seeing him, accusing him of carrying the blood of a traitor. It's funny how Adele can be so sharp and so slow at the same time. He asks the demon god if he really is the entity that rules over the demons in this world. This god is known as the god of pride. Adele asks him if he is going to survive this experience. The demon god replies that he would already be dead if that were what he wanted. But interestingly, he chooses not to kill him. For some inexplicable reason, he feels a kind of kinship with him. That's why he's willing to help the human, granting him the mark of pride. This insignia represents the powers of the god of pride. However, the deity warns him not to lose his mind over these powers, as they could drive him insane. Adele has now acquired the power of a god, greatly increasing his chances of surviving in this hellish dimension. At this point, he thinks his entire body will end up covered in marks and tattoos. Suddenly, the author feels the presence of someone spying on him from behind. Renee appears and they are both in shock. This is very bad for him, as Renee's father clearly didn't want her to know anything about this. She mutters the words, "Dark Priest," which go completely over his head. We skip forward 1 month and Adele has been training relentlessly. His mana reserve has tripled in that short period. He suspects that in a few years he'll have enough accumulated mana to surpass the heirs of the 6 houses of the human kingdom. In his current state, he could easily conquer the hidden domain without needing to teleport. Aside from that, the guy wonders why Renee has recently been training in front of his house instead of in the training grounds. To satisfy his curiosity, he decides to confront her. Luckily, Renee, she isn't avoiding him like she used to. Stubbornly, Adele thinks the girl probably misunderstands him, believing he is some kind of priest capable of communicating with the demon god, since only they can do that. Fortunately, she didn't hear the exact conversation he had with the god of pride, but in this case, being treated as someone superior to the Demon King's daughter is only going to bring him more trouble. Addressing her once again, Adele asks her to treat him like she did before. However, the girl feels a little embarrassed for having treated him coldly after seeing his power, while he's acting as her bodyguard. He reminds Renee that he's just following orders, so he would also like her to treat him normally. Renee decides to take him up on that and orders him to bring her water. Bro doesn't understand what she's plotting. Renee emphasizes that she's just doing what he asked, treating him coldly. Adele realizes that he'll have to follow all her orders at this point. He just can't win. After bringing her the water, he reflects on how he needs to conquer a domain. But unfortunately, Renee is glued to his side all the time. On top of that, a bigger problem is on the horizon. The story's protagonist will soon cross into the demon realm. Adele doesn't want to miss out on that domain's treasure, since the reward would help him survive in Saitan. Adele asks Renee about her preparations for the entrance exam, and she's a bit surprised that he'd ask such a question. Adele reasons that he will eventually have to face the strongest humans, which is why he's worried about her. However, Renee doesn't seem concerned at all, claiming she has everything prepared. Adele suggests that she double-check, because there could always be something important she's forgotten that might become a problem. Later, Renee gets annoyed by his vague language. Adele reveals that he's truly worried about her. But this girl is sharp. She won't be manipulated that easily. She quickly figures out that he wants to go off on his own while she's away. Bro hits a dead end with his approach, while Renee gets upset, thinking that perhaps he's already getting tired of her. To calm her down, Adele finally tells her the truth. He's interested in conquering a nearby domain. Instead of getting angry, she becomes thoughtful. She tells him that she actually had forgotten something, just as he said. At first, our protagonist is delighted. But then she reveals that what she forgot was to warm up before training. Basically, the girl wants to go with him to conquer the domain as a warm-up. She thinks they could easily conquer it in just one day. Of course, Adele is worried, but he can't say no to his superior. Now, let's dive deeper into this secret domain. It's called the Domain of the Undead, so you can probably guess what's coming. This place was once ruled by necromancers, but now it's just an abandoned place filled with undead soldiers after the necromancers were annihilated in the war. Renee is very knowledgeable about this domain, and that worries him, as it's a mid to high level domain. At the moment, the number of undead soldiers is alarming, which is why Renee's help will be necessary for this mission. The only problem is that going together will make it harder for him to escape with her, and if news reaches the Patriarch's ears, he'll get in trouble for putting her in danger. That's why he asks her not to go, arguing that the Patriarch would get mad if he found out they left without his permission. But this demonic girl already had it all figured out. She knows a secret way out of the mansion, leading him to a secret hole that no one knows about. Adele realizes she must be used to sneaking out, seeing how naturally she does it. Renee doesn't respond, and they both quickly use the exit. Arriving at a mountain range shrouded in mist, the pair presses on. Adele asks her how long it will take. But that seems to annoy her. He realizes he put his foot in his mouth and tells her to just keep moving. Renee explains that they will have to climb the mountain, and that will be the end of her part. It sounds easy, but for our protagonist, it's pure agony on the inside. Finally, they reach their destination. The site is destroyed and abandoned. Renee curses in her own language, while the author thinks he must hide his family name from her at all costs. Since he knows the way, they both dig out an entrance. The domain is located beneath a massive rock statue, with soldiers positioned below to protect its grounds. Upon reaching the entrance, Adele offers to go first for her, but Renee is confident and wants to take the lead. Inside the domain, Adele is impressed by how bright the place is. Renee finally arrives at the exact site they were searching for. Just from the energy it gives off, the author deduces that this is a region even more powerful than his family's training grounds. He suspects that at least 100 tombs are buried there. Renee and our protagonist continue to advance when suddenly, a skeleton and its companions emerge from the ground. These bald bags of bones surround the couple on all sides. Channeling her skills, Renee launches her attack and disintegrates the skeleton soldiers as if they were made of paper. Adele, at this moment, is very grateful he brought her along. He understands that there must be a necromancer summoning these soldiers, so they need to aim for him. He blocks an attack and tells Renee that he'll be right behind her, but the defeated soldiers just rise up again. To their surprise, the necromancer leading his troops watches them intently, impressed by their audacity in setting foot in his domain. He orders his soldiers to eliminate both intruders. This is bad for the pair, as the undead soldiers keep reviving. Adele instructs Renee to keep advancing and focus on the necromancer. Meanwhile, he is busy helping create an opening for her to accomplish her goal. After defeating more soldiers, the author tells her he'll take care of things on this side so she can concentrate on her role. Channeling her powers, the daughter of the demonic patriarch pushes forward to kill the necromancer. The mage summons even more soldiers to stop them, but Adele thinks they need to focus on eliminating him quickly. If they manage to destroy the spellcaster's orb, the battle will be won, since he'll be able to use his new position transfer ability But their problems grow when suddenly a King Kong-sized skeleton appears. Adele worries about Renee, but instead of being defeated like some weak Manhwa damsel, this girl ends up one-shotting the creature. She's far more powerful than Adele thought. With this, he activates position transfer to reach him quickly. Now, with his newest skill, he can swap objects with each other instead of swapping himself. So he uses the exchange spell, stripping the necromancer of his orb and placing it directly into Adele's hand. That was really all they needed, because the Bone Mage is about to be clapped without being able to cast any spells. With the orb destroyed and finished, the necromancer is automatically defeated along with his summons thanks to their combined efforts. They succeeded in eliminating the threat. Curiously, the necromancer's last words are of gratitude toward the human. Adele faces a harsh realization. He is the one who wrote the tragedy of this place in his story, and because of that, he truly feels sad for his characters and hopes that they can now finally rest in peace. Renee asks him if there is anything else to do, besides the boss battle, of course. There is the reward collection. He will finally be able to get the item he so desperately needs. The item is called the Fang of Darkness, a dagger made from a special steel from the demon realm. With it, he can convert darkness into mana and increase his abilities in the dark. The second item is a ring called the Eternal Full Moon, which allows the user to absorb mana quickly through moonlight. Adele is quite impressed by the dagger and realizes he can maximize his darkness attribute with this weapon. As for the ring, he doesn't really have any use for it, so he offers it to Renee. She accepts the reward, acting a bit flirty. Adele, like a gentleman, places the ring on her finger, which causes her to blush visibly from the experience. She quickly pulls her hand away, acting flustered, which leaves our dense protagonist clueless as to why she's acting like that. Renee, still a bit embarrassed, feels the effects of the ring coursing through her body. She likes it a lot. Next, Adele decides to keep all the gold from this place, but our MC's dreams are crushed when Renee goes into kill machine mode and warns him not to be selfish with the domain. With the domain cleared, the pair returns to the mansion just before dinner. They then continue to train together and another month passes. Eventually, the author makes great strides in the demon realm. He has accumulated around 1,300 mana, which is comparable to mid-level demons in the realm. Finally, the demon patriarch summons them a few days later, allowing them the opportunity to enter Satan. The time has finally come for both of them. They will go to the capital for the entrance exam. With the preparations ready, the patriarch orders them to leave without even caring for a proper farewell. Seeing Renee's expression, Adele realizes that she is sad. She simply bows to her father and leaves. Then our MC does the same to accompany her, but before he leaves, Creed stops him to remind him that he has high expectations for the human. This scene is sad in a way. The patriarch is wishing hope upon a human, but not his own daughter, who needs it the most. In the next scene, their carriage is ready as Creed watches them from above. The author realizes that even demons must have considerate feelings for their children, because he can tell that Creed truly cares for his daughter in this moment. The author may be worried about his future, but he is willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals at the Demon School of Satan. Their journey begins with a bumpy ride. Ever since they left the mansion, Renee has been terrifyingly quiet. He wonders if it's his fault. Finally, she turns to look at him with a strong gaze, reflecting that he is much more handsome than she had initially thought. This man is here talking about the weather because he has nothing else to talk about. Even she thinks he is somewhat dense and not particularly strong. At this point, she is starting to doubt her assumptions about his rank as a priest. Meanwhile, Adele wonders why she is staring so much. Renee calls herself a fool for doubting his powers. When she witnessed his conversation with the literal god of pride, the way they both are thinking of each other is hilarious, because Adele thinks he's in trouble while she's over here starting to fall for him. Now let's talk about what our MC did before giving her the ring. It's actually called an eternal vow in his dimension, and it's basically his way of marrying someone, even though Adele did it without saying a word. She's curious about the kind of vow he made by doing something like that, The demoness who used to be indifferent is actually interested in knowing his feelings. Anyway, Adele reminds her that they'll arrive in 1 hour. His empty words just make her more annoyed because she was over here daydreaming about a romance in her head without him telling her anything. He just decides to take a nap, leaving her in the dark. 1 hour later, they get off the carriage with their packed luggage. The capital of the demon kingdom is huge and looks a lot like the capital of the human kingdom. Although the demons here have horns and some physical differences, they aren't that hard to tell apart from humans. Elite demons are known for having markings on their bodies, like a blonde guy who has them on his neck. Renee tells him to hurry up and he follows her, asking where they're headed. Since the entrance exam is in 2 days, they need to register before that. Given that it's in 2 days, Adele suggests taking a tour of the capital in the meantime. But she seems uninterested and doesn't want to travel. Adele still thinks he's messed up, but again, she rejects him to register for the exam. Remembering the backstory he wrote for her, the author realizes that Renee never left her home because of her mother's death, so she should be feeling a sense of freedom here. However, for some reason, she seems uninterested in her surroundings. Anyway, they're finally at Saitan, an incredible university that is 3 times the size of a common one. The receptionist here is an old man who handles the registration process. Adele steps forward to speak on behalf of his lady, to the man's surprise, who points out that Adele doesn't even look like a demon in the first place. Even worse, the receptionist calls him a half-demon trying to apply for the Saitan exam. At this point, our MC knows that his future here is going to be a real pain to handle. The receptionist keeps ranting until he recognizes the horns of the demon princess, Renee. He mentions that she is from the House of Bear and that her guard will be admitted along with her. The guy keeps criticizing, though calling her guard a pathetic half-demon trying to enroll in the best demon academy. Renee doesn't want to hear his arrogant words anymore and reveals a hint of her power for insulting the Veer family. The guy wants to get into trouble for no reason at all. Just do your job, Baldy! Anyway, Adele mentions his name in the association with the House of Pixie, and with that, the registration process is completed to explain why the receptionist behaves this way. The author reflects that during the war, the half-demons ended up siding with the humans, and that's largely why the pure-blooded demons are upset with them. Anyway, with the registration finished, they need to get to their inn for the night. After locating a tavern that looks pretty good, Adele thinks it should be enough. But this rich and spoiled girl has her own complaints about the taverns here. Adele reminds her that they don't have her dad's money to splurge, so their options are limited. Crid only gave them 10 gold pieces, which will be enough for them to live on for 1 month, since the Bear House suffered great losses after the war, so they can't afford to overspend. The pair goes inside to book a room, with Adele handling all the talking for her. The funny thing is that Renee blushes the moment she hears the receptionist ask if they want to share a room. The guy insists they get separate rooms, and since they will be having 2 different rooms, the cost will be 2 gold pieces in total. It's not the worst deal in the world, according to the narrator. Renee heads upstairs, while Adele says he's going to unpack the luggage so she can rest, as she's always lived in a giant mansion. The narrator suspects this is her first time living in a place as modest as this, but she needs to get used to it as quickly as possible. As for him, he's going to need all the rest he can get for the upcoming exam. 2 days finally passed, and the day of the exam arrived. The applicants are told to follow strict instructions. There are so many applicants around them, which makes the narrator wonder if there are at least 100 candidates. The fact that so many talented people are signing up to kill humans is a warning sign for our MC, because the moment his identity gets leaked, everyone will be after him. The exam supervisor orders the students to take out their IDs and get on the train. It's the last thing he expected in the demon realm. For demons, they have installed dimensional gates to block any intruders trying to enter their realm. Trains are the only way to get across Saitan, and at this point, the narrator wonders just how big Saitan must actually be to have a train system installed so easily. The 2 of them get on the train and reach their destination in the blink of an eye. Finally, they are in front of the Grand Demon Academy. The applicants are told to follow their guide and enter the auditorium for the exam. They enter, and Adele is left speechless by the luxurious decorations. Every glance leaves him overwhelmed. He also notices that only young demons have come to take the exam, which makes it likely that the other heirs of the 7 deadly sins are also present. Dressed in long black cloaks, the narrator realizes that these people must be the instructors. Now he wants to make a good impression right away to increase his chances of having a good time in this hellhole. Renee mentions that their exam is about to start. The doors close immediately, and the once brightly lit place turns eerily dark. The narrator suspects that magic was used to achieve this effect and is curious about the content of the exam. The first command comes from a short female instructor with a distinctive look who demands that the applicants shut up. She welcomes everyone to Saitan and begins to curse out the poor candidates. She openly admits that she hopes to see them die this year. Wow, what a welcome. Adele trembles at the weight of her voice, that she's capable of giving him a malicious smile. The girl gets serious to handle her business, starting the exam procedure without warning them with another word. The pressure emanating from her body is enough to make every student feel overwhelmed. One after another, the weak candidates are quickly filtered out. The instructors aren't surprised by the cruel way the headmistress handles the exam. Yes, that crazy psychopath is actually the academy's headmistress. Furthermore, this test is one of mental fortitude. The reason Headmistress Lucian chose this test is because she wants to see if the candidates have enough power to withstand an interrogation by humans should the situation come to that. 5 painful minutes were endured by the candidates, and almost none of them were left standing, except for Renee, Adele, and 6 others. The female instructor initially had high expectations for the 100 candidates who took the exam. Still, it's more impressive than last year, which is already a good improvement. This group of candidates in particular includes the heirs of the 7 deadly sins. The instructors are certain of their arrival, however. They are surprised to find a stranger holding his ground. This guy is different from the heirs of the demonic families, and the fact that he has maintained his sanity for 10 minutes is proof of his caliber. However, beyond this point, the instructors believe the boy will fall. Although Adele is experiencing extreme agony, the male instructor perceives a dark energy pulsating from his body. Everyone is surprised, including Headmistress Lucian. The boy now looks like a demon god with this sudden transformation. Sensing the danger of the situation, the male instructor feels the need to act and eliminate the candidate immediately. At first glance, it was clear to everyone that the boy didn't seem special, but the moment he made the very atmosphere around him crumble, they recognized his hellish killing intent. It was a ruthless intent, as if he were one of the worst known assassins. Because of this, the instructor wanted to act immediately, but despite his readiness to act, Lucian observes that the instructor is hesitating. He is afraid to face such a formidable threat, even though the boy is just an applicant. His colleague smiles while the rest of the candidates are exhausted. At that moment, our MC understands that if he doesn't find a way to resist this test, he's going to fall apart. His mental state is going to collapse and he will go mad, just as the god of pride warned him. Then an idea pops into his mind. What if he used his killing intent to counteract the aura of the girl conducting the test? So he does exactly that. Knowing he can't just stand by and wait, his body emits tentacles of red demonic energy, countering Headmistress Lucian's aura. She is so impressed that she wants to increase the intensity of her aura to subdue him, but the MC is on the verge of going crazy, and, in fact, he holds his ground, even after Lucian increases the intensity. This catches her attention, and, finally, he manages to survive the test. Although he should be worried about himself, his attention is focused on Renee, who is holding her position without much trouble. The same goes for the other heirs of the 7 deadly sins, the heir of envy, Balton, the one of lust, Samuel, the one of gluttony, Aaron, the one of sloth, Gil, and the one of greed. All of them are holding their ground. The author comments that he wrote some of these characters with passion, but in the end, these significant characters, all of them are killed by the heroes of the story. He notices the 6 members and finally turns his gaze towards the heir of wrath, a beautiful girl with long, snow-white hair. She wears a crown of thorns and ruthless scarlet eyes. It was at that moment that he found himself looking at the worst villain of the story he wrote. He was in front of the future demon lord, Diana. The first part of the exam is concluded, But Adele is busy gathering his thoughts. Normally, the Demon King comes from the family of Wrath, so Diana basically has no need to be here at all. And yet, despite being the successor to the Demon Lord, she has come to apply as a candidate. This makes him wonder if something went wrong in the story. Anyway, the candidates who failed are being kicked out for not passing the test. Most of them are spoiled brats who complain about the cruel nature of the exam, but the instructors couldn't care less that they're a bunch of stuck-up brats. They make it very clear to these rich fools that their money is worthless here. The male instructor emphasizes that the applicants who couldn't even survive 5 minutes are not needed in the academy, so the gates are closed on the failed candidates. This first exam alone is enough to show how ruthless the Demon Academy is when dealing with its candidates. Fortunately, Adele passed, and he also notices that Lucian is actually the headmistress, rather than a typical supervisor. She is the strongest person in the demon realm despite her cute character appearance. Although he was lucky to survive the first test, he needs to hold his ground for the next ones, since most people fail the second exam. While this is happening, the author notices that Renee is drawing a lot of attention. He has many fans for being so strong with his combat skills. It makes sense that the heirs of the 7 deadly sins are famous figures. They were able to withstand Lucian's aura. Also, poor Adele, he's a little disappointed that he's not being noticed like the others, especially since he also held his ground. Renee approaches, praising his supposed bodyguard for passing. Even though he passed, the author is satisfied that he has shown the instructors he's not a normal candidate. With this impression, they will surely remember him, or so he thinks. The male instructor demands their attention and introduces himself properly as Ares, the instructor in charge of their education. This guy looks so intimidating that Adele thinks he probably always keeps a secret knife in his pockets. Ares congratulates the candidates who passed and explains the purpose of the exam, to test their mental fortitude in case they have to be interrogated by humans. The 8 applicants who survived will receive extra points, and if they succeed in the second exam, they will all get access to weapons. It's Christmas for our protagonist, who is as happy as can be to get the opportunity to get such a big prize. Well, the other candidates are just as upset about failing even more now. Ares begins to explain the nature of the second exam. First, they will show their skills regarding, based on the type of talents each one possesses for facing humans, they will be assigned a class, depending on this specific exam, so they must be careful to show their best selves. Adele understands what is being asked of the applicants, though he wonders what kind of humans they will have to face in this exam. Ares shows them the opponent they will face in this special exam, and with a snap of his fingers, he summons a creature born from the essence of light, wearing a distinctive set of armor and carrying a recognizable sword. Adele immediately realizes that they are about to be destroyed by the hands of the hero strongest of the 6 great human families. It's basically the definition of fighting the final boss of the game when you are at level 2. It makes no sense for this overpowered guy to be here. Renee observes his reaction and wonders if he knows about the guy. Of course, Adele can't even reveal that they are going to face Nenazel, the head of the house. Nenazel, a man closely related to the protagonist of the main story. To make matters worse, the narrator internalizes that this overpowered cousin of John Wick is actually the protagonist's father, the Sword Saint, who remains invincible solely because of his talent. Some of the candidates are smart enough to recognize who he is and have already lost hope of passing this test. It's no surprise they know him, as this guy is a one-man army, responsible for taking down multiple demon houses on his own. Of course, even Ares understands that the kids will be slaughtered in a direct battle against the Sword Saint, which is why he will not use more than 10% of his strength in the fight. Initially, Renee thinks this exam is going to be too easy with those odds, but the narrator reminds her carefully that they are facing a literal apocalyptic level threat inside a human's body. Even with only 10% of his power, the Sword Saint can easily destroy cities. This makes Adele curious about how these applicants will pass the exam. He thinks there must be some kind of criteria at play, and although the information scroll could be really useful here, he has no money to waste on it. Ares announces that they are going to divide the applicants into teams of 4 to face him directly. To make it fairer, the top 8 will be separated from each other, and the other candidates will be assigned randomly. The guy is really happy to be included on that list, while Renee is a little annoyed because her teammates are taking advantage of her. As for Adele's team, yeah, these guys are already making his life a living hell just by existing on the same team. Renee gives him a small pat on the shoulder, telling him to come back safe and sound. Adele cheerfully wishes her the same, and that's how the 33 groups were formed. Adele was the leader of the last group, and his teammates were Kina, Chris, and Sanchez. The narrator doesn't recognize any of those names, which means they are basically NPC characters with no specialty to move the plot forward. Kina and Chris are very friendly and greet him nicely, but Sanchez seems to be an arrogant emo with issues, immediately attacking our protag with his words, shaming him for being a half-demon. This situation is so bad for the author that even the trash NPC characters are here roasting him alive. Anyway, he ignores it and encourages the group to do their best. First, he wants to clarify some roles within the team, so he starts with Chris in an attempt to get to know her skills better. Chris cooperates well and shows her mana transformation ability, which allows her to turn a triangular prism into armor and a sword. Although her skills don't have a strong killing intent, they are versatile and can be used in various ways. This is a very good sign for Adele, who was looking for just that type of partner. Kina is next and explains that she is a support player instead of a damage dealer. With her powers, she can amplify her allies' speed by offering a prayer to the demon god. After casting her buff on Adele, she feels really exhausted, but our protag teases her by making jokes about her ability. Anyway, this is really, really bad for him. The girl's spell is practically weak as heck, so he has no idea how she managed to pass. The last one is Sanchez, who shows his rock type enhancement ability. The guy literally transforms into a rock man. Finally, Sanchez demands that the leader show his skills, throwing a ring at him. Our protag simply teleports to him with godlike speed, leaving Sanchez stunned, since in a real battle he could have killed him at any moment. Kina and Chris are very impressed by their leader's unique teleportation ability. In his mind, the author decided to keep the rest of his powers a secret because he doesn't know what they will face in the future. As for the team formation, he wants Chris and Sanchez to prioritize defense. He will take the center and Kina will provide support from the rear. It sounds like a formation good enough for the exam, so everyone agrees in unison. With that, the second exam is about to begin when Ares calls the designated teams to come forward. Group 1 is the first in line. The author is impressed to see that the candidates have a fiery look of determination, even though they were facing the Sword Saint. Although it doesn't matter much, because the moment the exam starts, it also ends in that same instant. Group 1 is annihilated, and not even Adele could see the Sword Saint during that brief moment. Ares calls Group 2, which is also annihilated. Group 3 suffers the same fate, and upon calling Group 4, the candidates rebel against the ridiculous nature of the exam, claiming that it's rigged from the start. Ares excludes the 2 candidates who complain about the test and asks the 2 remaining members if they still want to participate. Adele notices a blonde boy who steps forward to take the exam, despite being disabled. And at that moment, he reflects that this must be the hidden part of the puzzle to pass the second exam. The test for Group 4 begins with the 2 guys facing the Sword Saint. The result is already decided, as both are instantly defeated. If he had used real aura, they would be torn to pieces. Even our protag's team now doubts their abilities. Sanchez is practically trembling with fear. The Sword Saint continues to annihilate groups until Group 10 shows up and immediately surrenders. Finally, Group 20 is called and all the teams up to 30 are eliminated. From that point on, none of them even managed to land a decent hit. It was a fight against an unbeatable opponent. To his surprise, one of the candidates actually manages to block an attack. Curiously, Adele notices that the fights are getting longer and longer due to the skill difference between each group. He's now even more certain about the condition to pass the test. His team is a little scared because it's almost their turn to face him. Of course, our protagonist tells them his genius plan. He has figured out the test criteria and believes they must fight and hold out for as long as they can. After observing how the instructors are handling the applicants, He's even more convinced of his theory. Sanchez tries to object, but it's already too late. Their group is called to the front. Our protagonist is confident enough to believe they can defeat the Sword Saint in a direct fight. His words encourage his team, and they prepare to last longer than any other duel scene so far. Deep down, Adele plans to use the talent of the strongest villain in history to manipulate the odds in his favor. The fight begins with an interesting formation. Chris, Sanchez, Adele, and finally, their support. Since he doesn't have much information on the Sword Saint compared to other characters, he wonders what they should do in this tough situation and tells the team to gather information. As the Sword Saint launches his first attack, our protagonist roars to warn them in advance. But with a single slash of his sword, the barrier shield shatters, and not even Sanchez can block the attack. The author tells Kina to prioritize strengthening Chris so they can mitigate the impact of his fall after he was sent flying. He then orders Sanchez to do his job, which is basically to tank all the damage head-on. Thanks to his hardening ability as a tank, they manage to block the first attack. Adele quickly assesses an opening between the second slash and realizes it's a trap from his opponent. He doesn't want to take it because he thinks it's bait to lure them in. Focused on the battle, he informs his squad about the approaching second attack. The team gets into position, but Chris is the first to face his limitations. So far, just one attack was enough to wipe out a team, so this next one will finish the job if they're not careful. The Sword Saint unleashes his attack, showing the same opening. This time, not even Sanchez can withstand his strength, as his body suffers serious cuts from defending the team. Sanchez thinks they're going to die, but Adele insists on holding on for as long as possible, trying to predict his opponent's next move. Finally, the Sword Saint lowers his sword, but unfortunately, the test is not over yet. He is about to unleash a final attack, but Adele wants to face him head-on, a malicious expression forming on his face. The author declares that he will shove a sword down his opponent's throat, a statement that surprises his team. The Sword Saint prepares for his final attack, and Adele tells Sanchez to withstand it without Chris's intervention. It's a crazy idea, but Adele knows what he's doing. The Sword Saint practically destroys Sanchez's armor and launches him toward the ceiling. It's at that moment that the protagonist uses the position transfer skill to switch places with Sanchez, and in the small opening he gets, he activates the transfer again to focus on his opponent's sword. After making the blade disappear from his hand, he aims a black dagger directly at the Sword Saint's throat. As a final move, the attack stuns the rest of the instructors, but unfortunately for our protagonist, he fails to land the final blow and gets kicked so hard that he spits blood. Still, he remains a persistent opponent in this battle. The protagonist activates his darkness trait to envelop the surroundings. It's thanks to Chris's previous barrier that he survived the kick. Otherwise, his body would have been rendered completely useless. Although his attack failed, he managed to trap the Sword Saint inside a barrier without a single trace of light. In this void, he has a clear advantage with the Blade of Darkness in his hand. In a place like this, he has practically unlimited attack power, so he's confident in his strategy, or so he thought. Because the Sword Saint turns around menacingly and gives him a blood-curdling glare before appearing right before his eyes for another attack. Even Adele thinks he's facing a monster more demonic than any demon, but luckily, thanks to his control over the darkness, he pulls a dagger from a blind spot and aims at his opponent. This time, the Sword Saint didn't anticipate that our protagonist could summon hundreds of dimensional daggers. He activates the skill and they pierce the Sword Saint's body like projectiles, impaling him all over the black void. The void state confuses Adele's companions, while Ares realizes the fight is over. From the dark, Mist emerges a single standing warrior and one defeated on the ground. Adele is the victor, and his performance has left all the other candidates speechless. His strategy worked and even impressed one of the heirs. His companions rush over to him, celebrating his brilliant plan. Our protagonist is smart and doesn't go into detail about how he defeated the Sword Saint. As for Sanchez, the poor guy is in really bad shape, but the instructors are already helping him. To the team's surprise, the exam isn't over yet. Adele explains that they must complete one final step: drive the blade deep into their opponent's body. The protagonist demonstrates his cruelty in front of the instructors, which even amuses the heirs. Fran thinks he's quite impressive for a half-demon. However, she also thinks he's still naturally inferior to a pureblood. Her words have just infuriated Renee, who begins to release a murderous aura. In response, Fran wonders what is causing the bear princess to act so aggressively. A chill runs down her spine. Fran's servants are a bunch of pathetic simps who believe she will defeat Renee. Back with Adele, he notices that Renee is radiating bloodlust and wonders what's going on. But that's not the most important thing right now. As instructor Aries approaches him and asks if he knows why he's there. Seeing his nonchalant response, Aries turns and tells him he'll be keeping a close eye on him. Adele is a little disappointed that he didn't receive any praise or anything of the sort. At that moment, a fight is brewing between Renee and Fran. Adele wonders who the demon Renee is facing based on her appearance. She realizes she belongs to the House of Lust, but it makes no sense that she's challenging Renee, of all people. The author admits he was naive to write in-depth only about his human characters and neglect the demons. Fran spots the half-breed from a distance and calls him out on it directly. The guy didn't see it coming, but this crazy girl makes it even worse by ordering him to become her slave. Hearing that, Renee becomes even more furious, ready to kill. She lunges forward to unleash her first attack. Seeing her guardian being disrespected by the embodiment of lust, Lady Renee charges forward with her sword drawn. She didn't give Laurel Fran time to react. The two would have clashed if it weren't for the instructor's intervention, who warned them that unnecessary squabbles within the Satan campus are strictly forbidden. If they want to tear each other to pieces, they should settle their conflict outside of school. The students watching the fight were dumbfounded. If Aries hadn't stepped in, something terrible could have happened to two of the top candidates from the family of the 7 deadly sins. Renee sheathed her sword at once with a huff. While Laurel trembled with a nervous smile, Adele went to check on his lady, and she looked at him in silence as he signaled for her to join her group on stage for the exam. Lady Renee took out a handkerchief and wiped Adele's sweat. Instead of ignoring him, she gently wiped his face and praised his performance. It should have been me, not him, thought Laurel, who clearly hadn't learned her lesson, criticizing Lady Renee for getting too close to a half-demon. Adele ignored her racism, simply happy to be treated a little better after passing the exam. Looking him in the eye, Lady Renee asked if he had hidden his strength during the test. Adele was confused. He'd had to risk it all just to land that one hit. Finally, Group 34 was called to the stage, and Renee walked up calmly, vowing to keep Adele's true strength a secret. She must think he's some almighty priest from a major family. With Lady Renee gone, Laurel Fran pounced once again to bother Adele. A sly smile appeared on her face as she said his name. Seductively annoyed at being interrupted earlier, she ordered Adele to leave Renee and serve her instead. Laurel believes that with her charm, she can steal this nobody of a guard to avenge her earlier humiliation, but completely indifferent? Adele rejected her with utter nonchalance and turned his attention back to Lady Renee's performance. While Laurel threw a childish tantrum, he focused on the stage. Adele had high expectations for the heirs of the other 7 deadly sins families, but he was rooting for Renee. The Sword Saint had been reconstructed, emitting a chilling aura across its entire attack range. It was an intense showdown, and Renee showed not a hint of fear. In fact, she stepped forward, completely ignoring the 3 nobodies in her group. Her actions even caught the attention of the future Demon King Bolton. The heir of envy chuckled at her audacity. Adele, on the other hand, felt every alarm bell in his head go off. Logically, approaching the Sword Saint was a death sentence, and the two were now just a few inches apart. The duel of auras began. An old man and a young woman faced off to see who could dominate the environment with their presence. After what felt like an eternity, both of them twisted their expressions with ferocity. The Sword Saint tried to stab her, but ended up being split in 2. His sword and his torso were cut in half. Everyone was dumbfounded by the young woman's display of dominance. Not wasting another second on this silly test or even looking back at her victim, Lady Renee returned in silence and was greeted with cheers. Even instructor Aries was visibly pleased with her performance. Perhaps the most surprised of all was Adele. The Sword Saint must have sensed how good she was at fighting, and that's why he didn't dare to attack her first, like a true conceited loser. Laurel scoffed at Renee's performance. Curious, Adele asked the Heiress of Lust if a team made up of the heirs of the 7 deadly sins could defeat the real Sword Saint at his full power. She laughed and replied that no living being can currently defeat the real Sword Saint. Maybe if the previous Demon King were still alive, they would have a chance. Besides, anyone with eyes could see that the pathetic impersonator they are using for this test is much weaker than that supposed 10% of power the instructors claim. Adele just realized that he had a ton of trouble against a copy that doesn't even have 1/10 of the real power. He created this world, but he is too ignorant about the demon realm. Still, anticipation makes his heart pound. The remaining groups about to be evaluated are all led by heirs of the 7 deadly sins. Maybe they were motivated by Renee's performance, but the other heirs also proved why they are who they are. They all destroyed the fake Sword Saint with ease, so it's difficult to gauge the difference between the different families, but Adele already knows who the best 2 in this group are, the 2 who will become key characters in the future. Once everyone had their turn, the entrance exams finally concluded. After gathering everyone in front of the podium, Instructor Aries announced that everyone who had the courage to participate in combat, regardless of the outcome, got a passing grade. With this, the remaining youths are now official apprentices of Satan. Aries warned them not to celebrate yet, since all they had done was buy their ticket to a hellish path that has already broken many demons before. For those who passed, the initiation ceremony will take place in 2 days. Those who managed to defeat the Sword Saint must stay a bit longer. Adele guessed this had something to do with the promise of a reward mentioned during the first test. The heirs of the 7 deadly sins, along with Adele, passed with honors and will get the chance to enter the arsenal. Before that, Balton raised his hand with a question. He wanted to know if they could leave the arsenal with a bunch of weapons in hand. He's excited to see what Satan has prepared for him. This delusional question is typical of the son of Envy, Balton, who has an insatiable curiosity and appetite. Adele remembers writing quite a bit about this guy in his novel. Instructor Aries calmly replied that the apprentices would have a very difficult time progressing if they carried multiple weapons, so they will only be allowed to carry 1. Refusing to answer any more absurd questions, he led them to the arsenal. He touched the surface of a wall, and a magic seal activated a hidden door that materialized before everyone's eyes. Aries added that this was a privilege Saitano granted only to outstanding apprentices. Whether they chose well or poorly, that depended entirely on fate. Instead of looking like an armory, the entrance more closely resembled a dungeon door. Aries instructed the participants to enter in the reverse order of the exam, and that they would be inspected upon leaving. That gave Velton the first choice and Adele the last. It's clear the big guy doesn't like him very much. Excited to get the first treasure for himself, Velton brazenly waved at everyone before entering. Since Lady Renee already had a decent weapon, she planned to pick up some artifact inside, and Adele was thinking the same thing. Since they were thinking about it, surely the others' heirs would be considering it too. All the good artifacts might be gone before it was Adele's turn. Balton came out of the armory wearing a crown of blackthorn, completely satisfied with his choice. The worst-case scenario was happening just as Adele thought. Everyone was coming out with artifacts. Before he knew it, it was his turn. He saw the bracelet on Renee's wrist and asked about its functions. She simply told him to go in and find out for himself. She also warned him about some items on display that have no descriptions. They might not have any explanatory text, but if they're stored in the armory, they can't be trash, right? Just before entering, Adele shot Aries a look full of intention. Apparently, the big guy took offense and told him to speak up if he had something to say. With an awkward laugh, Adele asked him what the deal was with the items without descriptions. Aries briefly explained that those were artifacts and weapons with purposes that were unknown and had no registered owner. If one is lucky, they might get an amazing relic, but they could also receive a lifelong curse. With a final warning, Aries urged the last participant to enter. Adele would just have to find out if going last was a good thing or a bad idea. Once inside, the structure changed dramatically. Surprisingly, it was a bright and orderly place. Although he felt a certain anxiety, He saw a light at the end of a long hallway and followed it. Upon reaching the armory proper, he was greeted by a breathtaking sight. Weapons and artifacts sealed behind magic crystals, all sorts of demonic relics filled the enormous room. Turning to the right, he found a unique-looking spear and read its description. It was the Spear of the Twin Fangs, a weapon used by a nameless demon to hunt snakes. Vengeful snake spirits dwelled in its tip, and when infused with mana, 2 serpents would emerge. The description tried to make it sound important, but it was actually a pretty mediocre weapon. Besides, Adele already had his daggers. Next, he examined the starlight crystal once used by a talented astrologer. By injecting it with mana, the user could harness the light of the stars to illuminate the surroundings. Basically, it was a fancy flashlight. Seeing an empty magic display case, he curiously looked at the description of the item that was once there. It was the Great Circlet of the Victor, which granted exceptional recovery and resistance, binding to the user until the day of their death. Tellingly, that was what Bolton was wearing on his head. Adele found this strange. He remembered having removed binding items in his novel, so he didn't expect to find one here. Looking from side to side to inspect the place, he became more and more convinced that all the good items had already been taken. The python's binding was gone, as was the demonic general's flag, and the fallen noble's insignia. The 7 deadly sins had taken most of the artifacts, broken, and almost all the remaining armor and weapons were little more than scrap metal. Thinking he no longer had any decent options, Adele turned his attention to a cursed artifact, but then he remembered a unique method that only he could use. He took out his magic paper and decided to spend some gold. He approached a nondescript broken sword and asked the paper for information about it. It asked for an artifact of a grade higher as payment than a relic or 100 gold coins. Before taking out his savings, he realized something else, deciding to test an idea that was forming in his mind. He turned to a damaged scroll and did the same. This time, the paper asked for at least 50 gold coins for more information. Since the paper evaluates importance by cost, he realized he didn't even need to pay. He just had to check which item had the highest asking price. There were a total of 7 nondescript boxes, and he quickly examined them. The information on a black eagle-shaped stone cost only 1 gold coin. It was an obvious scam since it only cost 1 coin. Adele saw no problem spending a little and found out the eagle's function. It exchanged its owner's fortune for another's misfortune. In other words, it was trash. Adele continued checking the unknown items. Some information cost 100 coins and others around 50. None seemed to be extraordinarily powerful. There were only 2 left to check, and he finally found one that cost 300 gold coins, a pauldron. The paper estimated it was at least a mythic artifact. This thing put all the other artifacts chosen by the heirs to shame. Just as he was about to decide on the pauldron, his attention was inexplicably drawn to the last item, a nondescript one he hadn't explored yet. He felt a strange sensation of being watched, even though he was alone. The artifact was in the shape of a simple necklace. Something told him that Adele's keen senses were reacting. He took out the magic paper and asked for more information about the strange accessory. The paper shone brightly and flew on its own, emanating a blinding light. It showed a single phrase: "You must offer a god." This had to be at least legendary class if it asked for a god as a sacrifice. Just when he thought he was doomed, he had actually been blessed. Thinking about it a little more, he realized he was jumping to conclusions. Right now, he wasn't even associated with a lesser god, let alone a demon god for the time being. He decided to try infusing a bit of his mana into the mysterious necklace. After a few seconds, he only got absolute silence. It was frustrating. He had something extraordinary in front of him and had no idea what it was capable of. He racked his brain trying other tricks with the paper, hoping to get some information by phrasing his questions differently. However, no matter how he asked, whenever it was about the necklace, the paper demanded the offering of a god in exchange. Finally, he started to accept that he wouldn't get anything for free. Still, he took the risk and chose the jeweled necklace as his reward. Regardless of its function, he was sure he had gotten the most valuable item in the armory by equipping the accessory. He opened his status window to check for any changes, just as he expected. An unknown trait that wasn't there before appeared. Now he just had to take his time to figure out what that item really was. When he left the arsenal, Instructor Aries asked him about his strange choice. Adele sincerely explained that he chose an item with no description. When asked if he had any inside information, he honestly replied that he didn't, which technically wasn't a lie. Adele just couldn't think of a good reason why the instructor was looking at him with such suspicion. Finally, the big guy gave in. Maybe it was a bit suspicious, but he had to trust his cadet's words. He turned to the most promising first-year students and advised them to take good care of their chosen artifacts, as they could be their lifelines. Adele scanned the room and saw figures who would soon lead the demonic world. Without a doubt, they would receive a lot of investment and support in the future. If he could manage to funnel some of those resources his way, he would be satisfied. Afterward, the hidden door of the arsenal disappeared without a trace. With the exams over, it was time for the lady and her guard to return to their dorm. Before they could leave, someone stopped Adele just as he was about to take another step. Baltan, smiling, approached to apologize for his earlier rudeness, introduced himself properly, and held out his hand to make peace. This came out of nowhere, but Adele wasn't one to refuse a courtesy. However, as soon as he shook Baltan's hand, he realized this guy was the complete opposite of polite. He squeezed his hand with brutal force, a mischievous smile plastered on his face. Adele felt a sharp, crushing pain shoot through his hand. Baltan is the type of person who doesn't give a damn about the weak. He's only interested in the strong, driven by jealousy and envy. He once drove the novel's protagonist to the brink of death, but when he realized the character's potential, he spared him just so he could face him again in the future. Yep, Baltan is a combat-thirsty psycho, and with that arrogant smirk stuck on his face, he provoked Adele to get a reaction. So Adele targeted Baltan's sword for his position-swapping technique. In the blink of an eye, he switched places with the sword, tapping the arrogant guy's shoulder. The test was over, so Adele had no intention of playing along with a spoiled brat's whims. Besides, that handshake nearly crushed his bones. In response, Baltan let out a laugh, amused. Seeing Adele's skill only fueled his fighting spirit even more. Now, he wanted a duel to the death. Before things could get out of hand, Lady Renee stepped in to stop the psychopath. Emitting her own chilling aura, she warned Baltan that she would join the fight if he continued his nonsense. Finally, the lunatic reined in his energy. As much as he loved a good fight, facing two heavyweights at the same time was too much. He didn't want to risk getting injured before classes even started. Besides, there will be plenty of opportunities to spill blood later. That maniac is truly insane. He says he doesn't want to get injured, but he's fine with a death match. Adele can't get rid of Baltan just yet. For now, it's time to retreat with the young lady. Despite all the craziness, Adele couldn't help but feel excited about the life ahead. Back at the hotel, Adele woke up feeling refreshed in the morning. The guy casually walks around, showing off his perfectly toned body just to make us feel mortal. He feels better and is getting stronger every day. Excited, he took out the uniform the Saitan Academy had sent him to try it on. Putting on the standard black pants and the black blazer with patches, he was surprised by how comfortable it was. For 3 full years, they are not allowed to wear anything other than the uniform, but at least it is practical. Eager to see Lady Renee in hers, he hurried to her room and knocked on the door. Upon confirming it was her guard, Renee opened it. Adele was left speechless, seeing how beautiful she looked in the classic blazer and skirt, illuminated by the sunlight filtering through the window. He could not help but compliment her, making the young lady blush. She might be cold-blooded with a sword, but her cute side is just as deadly. Since Adele had a rare day off, he planned to walk around the city a bit. He bowed and advised her to rest, but before he could leave, she stopped him. With a red and shy face, she asked if he was forgetting something. She reminded him that he had a day off as a student, but not as her bodyguard. He had completely forgotten his main duty, excited by the idea of resting alone. As a compromise, she decided to join him for a walk around the city after changing. And just like that, his long-awaited day off vanished, but his regret was erased by the city's vitality. With how clean and peaceful it looks, it is hard to believe a war was fought there just 10 years ago. Reconstruction is still ongoing in the outer regions. The humans may have won the war, but they did not manage to completely take the capital. Tugging on his sleeve, Lady Renee innocently pointed to a street food stall, eager to try something. The meat glistened in the heat, cooked just right, a skewer of venison seasoned with vegetables. Curious to know if it tasted like chicken, Adele ordered two, one for him and one for her. As soon as they took the first bite, the pleasant flavor lifted their spirits. Adele was amused to see Renee making such an adorable expression. Maybe she is starting to open up to him little by little. Both of them continued strolling through the central square, chatting joyfully. It had been a long time since Adele had a real break, and this would probably be his last for a long time. Eventually, their walk led them to an imposing statue in the center of the capital. Adele looked at the enormous figure in bewilderment, and Renee had to explain that it depicted the image of the first Demon King. Looking at it more closely, he noticed an unsettling resemblance to Diana. It is not every day one gets to see the features of the first Demon King in such detail. When Adele tried to focus a little more, he saw the statue's eyes glowing with a familiar light. The necklace hanging from his neck resonated with that piercing gaze. The solemn monument to the first Demon King shot an otherworldly energy directly into his artifact, to his surprise. This caused one of the gems to lose its luster and turn gray. The strangest part was that Renee did not see what had just happened. She only noticed Adele acting strangely and taking out his artifact. Normally, it would be impossible for someone not to notice such a blinding light, but from Renee's confused expression, he really had no idea what had just happened. He remembered a page that asked him to offer God in exchange for information. And now he had just discovered something significant in the most unexpected place. He is sure that his artifact is somehow connected to the first Demon King, which motivated him even more to investigate. With that, his walk through the city came to an end, with Adele brimming with curiosity. The next morning, they headed straight to Saitan for the entrance ceremony. The principal and the instructors were on stage in front of about 100 new students gathered in the auditorium. Adele could hear the rookies calling the principal a little girl, even though she could crush them without lifting a finger. Some even found her adorable. They were calling a girl covered in tattoos cute. Some of Adele's classmates should have the contents of their hard drives checked. Suddenly, the principal shot a death glare at the rowdy students. Adele made a mental note. She can possibly read minds. With Instructor Aries' shout, everyone fell silent and the ceremony began. The principal's opening speech was pretty standard and the atmosphere calmed down. With that out of the way, the oath-taking of the top cadet and the runner-up began. As expected, the honors went to Diana and Baltan. Adele glanced at Lady Renee, who didn't seem affected by not getting one of the top spots. It makes sense, considering her only reason for enrolling in the academy is to get revenge on her mother. She's not interested in competing. As for Adele, he has his own agenda, no matter what anyone else says. On the way to the stage, Baltan shot Adele a defiant look and an arrogant smirk. Adele chose to ignore him. Getting involved with that lunatic could only lead to trouble. When the top cadet took the stage, her mere presence made it clear why she was at the top, as expected of someone blessed by the gods. The daughter of the Demon King, Diana, is simply unmatched. The top cadet's oath to erase their disgrace and rebuild the demon realm echoed throughout the auditorium. Everyone could feel the rage of those who lost their homes and families at the hands of humans. If these demons find out that Adele belongs to the Arsen lineage, the worst-case scenario would be an eternity of torture. Once the ceremony was over, Instructor Aries told everyone to check their assigned classes on the bulletin board. The students lined up neatly to look for their names. Checking the list, Adele found his name under Class A. When he looked for Lady Renee's name, a tear almost escaped him. Luckily, his boss was assigned to Class C. He tried to look annoyed, but the smile on his face betrayed his relief. She reminded him that he is still her bodyguard and must drop whatever he's doing whenever she needs him. Satisfied with his newfound small freedom, Adele headed to his assigned classroom. On the way, he accidentally bumped into another student. The guy turned to him with murderous eyes, veins popping on his neck. With a rude attitude, he threatened to kill him and called him despicable. Adele was baffled by such sudden hostility from a stranger. He recognized the guy. He was Barris's son, Samuel, a descendant of the sin of gluttony, and quite strong even among the 7 deadly sins. Even though it was his fault, The boy wanted to pick a fight, while Adele was trying to avoid trouble from the very first day. Adele apologized. Samuel is an unbearable guy with an extremely punchable face. Aside from Lady Renee, it seems the children of the 7 deadly sins are all weird. Adele can only pray not to end up in Class A with Balton. In Saiton's faculty room, a heated meeting was taking place. Instructor Idea was protesting that she should be respected as a proper Saiton instructor. Instructor Aries argued that simply she couldn't be trusted to handle a particularly dangerous child, and claimed that he had more experience handling these types of cases. Idea found it absurd that this man was trying to undermine her to take control of Class A. Mediating between the two, Principal Lucian told them to shut up. Idea found it unfair that she was always the one receiving criticism. To clear things up, the principal let Aries explain his reason for wanting to switch classes with Idea. He simply explained that he was better prepared to handle that cadet, Adele, since he had faced countless enemies like that boy on the battlefield. A single glance was enough for him to see that the boy was a natural-born killer, the type of person who would point his sword at his own allies and who must be contained immediately. The other instructors thought he was exaggerating about a half-demon child who was considerably weaker than the children of the 7 deadly sins. Aries argued that raw power doesn't define true strength, and that Adele's boldness and composure were on par with the best of the heirs, which is why he wanted to take over Class A to keep a close eye on the cadet. So in the end, he was simply saying that Instructor Idea couldn't be trusted to handle an outstanding cadet. Hearing this useless chatter, the principal sighed and released a bit of her aura, forcing the instructors to shut up. Although she understood Aries' concerns, changing class advisors now would do more harm than good. However, she also acknowledged that being a little cautious wouldn't hurt, so she simply tasked Instructor Idea with paying special attention to the boy Adele. With that, the meeting concluded and the first day of class finally began inside the Class A classroom. Adele sat in silence while cursing his luck. In front of him was Laura Fraun, the heir of lust, who wouldn't stop pestering him. At least being stuck with her was better than being stuck with Diana or Balton. Another of his classmates was Samuel, the ill-tempered brat of Gluttony and Laurel. Smugly, she asked if he had followed her to the class, when everyone knew that class assignments were random. With a shameless laugh, she granted Adele the privilege of being her slave once again. Look at those horns. Some of you would have surrendered immediately. While they were having a one-sided conversation, Samuel intervened and threatened to kill them both if they didn't shut up. Even for a demon, this kid is unbearable. Laurel didn't like his tone at all. But fortunately, she found another target to annoy, leaving Adele alone to lament, because this would be his life for the near future. The door burst open and Instructor Idea entered the classroom, silencing everyone. Her presence commanded respect. When she finally reached the podium, Instructor Idea introduced herself to the Class A cadets. She also added that people more commonly know her as the Legion of Calamity. That's a badass nickname, not gonna lie. The students murmured among themselves upon hearing her nickname. It was said she had killed 10 to 30,000 humans at the Palak River, all by herself. Adele liked what he heard. With such a strong mentor, his chances of survival should greatly improve after the introductions. She continued by explaining how their classes would proceed in the coming days. In reality, it's quite simple. She would be in charge of teaching them hunting methods. Of course, they wouldn't be hunting animals or demonic beasts, but rather one of the main reasons why the cadets come to Satan. They will learn to hunt humans. Adele kept a straight face upon hearing this. Instructor Idea will be solely responsible for the hunting classes, while magic and weaponry will be taught by other qualified instructors. In addition to that, she will also handle basic endurance training. For their first class, being cooped up in a classroom won't be enough. They need to go to the training grounds. As soon as Adele laid eyes on the field, he was surprised by its size. It was probably 4 or 5 times larger than a typical field. With everyone gathered, Instructor Idea activated her ability and summoned a swirling black hole, directing everyone to pay attention to her actions. When the black hole reached critical mass, an expanse of darkness descended. The hole transformed into a portal, and the sound of marching metal resounded. An army of human crusaders emerged from the portal with blank expressions. Seeing the tense faces of her cadets, she assured them they were just illusions created by magic. She also created the Sword Saint, who had tested their mettle in the entrance exam. Adele could tell that someone capable of creating a clone that was close to 1/10 of the Sword Saint's power was not someone to be messed with. This instructor is a monster in her own right. While Aton is quite formidable, he is pretty sure the real instructor surpasses him by a considerable margin. Instructor Idea gave the Class A cadets a simple task. They must get past the humans and reach her to begin. She scanned the field until her eyes landed on one particular cadet. She called on Adele to be the first to try it, with a sly smile. She challenged him to stab her in the throat like he did to the Sword Saint's clone, just when he thought he would escape the gazes of the inquisitive instructor Ares. It seems Instructor Idea is also wary of him. He first asked if they wouldn't have a normal, direct fight. She explained that humans use their leader as a source of mental fortitude. They are susceptible to falling like dominoes when the leader falls. A strong leader begets a strong army. She will take on that role for this combat. Adele thought it made sense. Sun Tzu's Art of War had laid out the concept that an enemy can be defeated by capturing their leader. As he drew his dagger, a confident smile appeared on his face. Subduing a leader in the midst of an army is too easy. Instructor Idea cheerfully added that subduing her is impossible, so a simple touch of the hand or a weapon strike will do. On her body would be enough to pass, and so she ordered her human army to begin the assault. Barely 1 second had passed, and Adele had already transferred his position from behind the confident instructor. His dagger could cut off her head if he wanted. The confident smile disappeared from her face, as a heavy killing intent froze her in place. Adele playfully asked her if that was enough to pass. They had started a dozen meters apart, but for him that distance was nothing anymore. Now, he only had to transfer his position 2 times to surprise her. He was constantly improving. The limit of his position transfer will soon make him the perfect assassin, capable of taking down any enemy base with ease and skill. The Instructor Idea laughed. She's not naive enough to leave her body unprotected. Her body is protected by a barrier. At least now she understands why Ares is so determined to keep an eye on this boy. She gave him a passing grade and told him to go back to his spot. As he walked back to the line, he wondered if what he had felt was hostility or curiosity. Either way, he was worried that his identity would be leaked. Instructor Idea singled out Adele and warned the rest of the class that those who failed would receive extra classes. And so the cadets in the class took turns trying to get through an army of human clones. As expected of demons, they had already mastered the basics of combat. It also helped that they were fighting the equivalent of normal humans with no powers. Still, all that everyone had managed so far was to take down a few puppets that the instructor wasn't even directly controlling. One by one, the cadets were forced to surrender after being overwhelmed by a poorly assembled battalion formation. The next cadet who was called saw his classmates' mistakes and tried to use the high ground to get around the wall of human puppets. He was quickly taken down by a group of puppet archers and their arrows. Adele smiled awkwardly at such pathetic displays. Moments like this reminded him how broken position transfer really is. At this rate, he should be able to aim for the top spot in the class. Next on the list was none other than Samuel. Adele is eager to see if this brat's arrogant attitude matches his skill level. As he took his starting position, Samuel began to gather mana around his body. The amount of concentrated mana kept growing until the pressure in the area increased. Living up to his arrogance, Samuel's mana turned into a whirlwind that spun with pure destructive power. The other cadets were almost blown away by the scorching wind. Adele watched in amazement as Samuel annihilated the entire human battalion in a single blow. This was the first time he had seen magic at such a high level. Samuel's unique and gluttonous skill is a monstrous power that can devour everything in its path. Adele thought the boy might take first place in the class for now, but when the dust settled, Instructor Idea appeared unharmed. In fact, she was quite disappointed with this group. Adele expected as much. There's no way an instructor would let a cadet take her down. Samuel's attack swept the board, leaving the leader untouched. It was an impressive feat that caused a slight surprise for a brief second. Unfortunately for him, he failed like many others. Samuel was shocked, looking like he wanted to argue, to appeal the decision. But Instructor Idea simply snapped her fingers and showed why an elemental was useless against her. Behind her was an entire army of human puppets. Once again, she stressed that if a leader is left alive, humans will always find replacements to fill their ranks. Estimating there must have been about 200 puppets behind the instructor, Adele couldn't help but think that Samuel's magic was impressive, but only for a rookie cadet. The irritating Samuel knew better than to talk back, so he scoffed and returned to the group. Adele was surprised that the boy could accept such a harsh result, even though he was filled with discontent. When their eyes met for a second, Samuel felt his anger rise. The boy's overconfidence in his ability was the root of his failure. If he had focused all that power on the real target, he would have been able to pass the test without any problems. The initial evaluation continued as Idea called another cadet. An arrogant laugh echoed through the crowd, and Laurel Brown stepped forward, excited for her turn in the spotlight. The other cadets were sure she would pass. The only question was how she would perform against the puppets. Calling them servants who dared to block her path, her arrogant words didn't get the response she expected. Sweating nervously, her haughty words stopped coming out as she realized she couldn't use her abilities on the puppets. Desperate, she thought of a way to get out of this mess. As Adele expected, a girl with her kind of lustful aura isn't the type of person who would fight directly. In the entrance exam, she used her classmates as crazed servants while she stayed behind, giving orders like a queen bee. She's practically harmless without servants. Desperate for a solution, she turned her attention to the group of cadets and made eye contact with Adele. With pleading eyes, she asked him for help, but she still referred to him as a slave. Unaware of their one-sided dynamic, the whole class was quietly discussing what they had just heard. Adele wasn't going to help Laurel in the first place, but now he definitely wouldn't. Tired of her crying, Instructor Idea ordered her army to advance. Laurel backed away as she saw the puppets surround her and begin to beat her with fists and kicks. Adele couldn't believe she didn't even bother to learn how to cast buffs on herself. Everyone watched as the puppets beat her for a worryingly long time while she begged for help. While everyone was focused on the beating, Adele's attention drifted. He had just seen one of his classmates heal a wound. Healing magic is a power that only humans can use. Given this, it was safe to assume that the pink-haired girl must be also half demon. The talent for healing is rare, and a demon that can heal is practically non-existent. Although he didn't remember the girl's name, he made a mental note to find a way to connect with her somehow. Just as he was about to approach her, Instructor Idea asked him to help Cadet Fran get back to the classroom, now that the test was over. Her timing couldn't have been worse. He would rather try to befriend the healer instead of taking care of a spoiled brat. He bent down and flicked the beaten and battered Laurel on the forehead, calling her useless. Adele poked her repeatedly to wake her up and get her to stand. At least, when she called him a slave, he could retort that she was pathetically weaker than one. Before the class ended, Instructor Idea ordered everyone to gather and line up. She had high expectations, but the results were, to say the least, disappointing. Still, today was a good first lesson. It's important for these youngsters to experience an overwhelming defeat so they can understand their place in the world. It's imperative that they see where their flaws are and what mistakes they make. Discovering their limits early is a big step forward. Knowing this allows them to support each other in battle. Adele found it strange that Saiton used random class assignments when human imperial schools usually separate students based on their abilities. Instructor Idea touched on the concept of synergy. Despite all the failures today, one student passed the test, standing out from the crowd. Idea gave him a long look, saying she would pay attention to his progress. Adele awkwardly thanked her, feeling the stares of his classmates burning into his back. Finally, they were dismissed and told to return to the classroom for their next class. If the instructors are hostile, so are their classmates. Samuel, in particular, seemed ready to jump him. Adele is worried that at this point, forming his own faction might be nearly impossible, with all the interference from those annoying guys from the 7 Deadly Sins. After homeroom, the rest of the lessons went smoothly. The next class on his schedule was theoretical education. In the theory class, they learned about the history of the demon kingdom and the general weaknesses of humans. Adele listened attentively. Today, he learned that demons have a body structure practically identical to humans, and that hitting certain body parts equates to the same level of pain. Next time they will have an exam, so the instructor reminded them to study. It was surprisingly normal, however. Adele found it tedious to go through school since he had already experienced it in his past life. It's only the first day, but he already feels defeated. Just like in his previous life, he has no friends to talk to after class. Speaking of friends, there's a girl he's been trying to connect with, the pink-haired lady who has healing powers. Since the next class won't start for a few minutes, maybe this is his chance to talk to her. Walking slowly towards her desk, the two exchanged a look. With a warm smile, Adele properly introduced himself. The girl looked at him silently, while the rest of the class stopped what they were doing and paid attention to the two of them. Now that he thinks about it, Adele realizes that when she's visibly uncomfortable with this, so it would be best to leave the rest of the conversation for next time. He quickly removed himself from the awkward situation and headed for the door. He just wanted to go to the bathroom and feed his loneliness with his manna or something, when suddenly the door opened and Samuel came in for the umpteenth time today. The two stared at each other. Adele just wanted to get out. But this irritating brat looked at him as if he were lower than dirt. Trying to maintain the status quo, Adele reluctantly gave way and let him pass first. As the boy passed, Samuel scoffed and muttered something about how he was a disgusting low-class creature. Everyone has a limit. Adele did her best to stay out of trouble all day, but she finally reached her breaking point. She turned her head and sarcastically praised Samuel's family, apparently hitting a sore spot. Samuel unleashed his foul aura and demanded she repeat what she just said, reinforcing his challenge. Adele praised the gluttonous family for producing absolute trash that can walk and talk. Those words pushed Samuel over the edge. Although, to be fair, it doesn't take much to provoke him and unleash his uncontrolled rage. Unlike Baltan, who knows when to push and when to pull back, this fool can't control his pure hatred and hostility. If this kid is going to get in the way of Adele's plans, then it would be best to take him out of the equation right now. Samuel contorted and molded his mana around his body, forming a spiky armor. Adele didn't flinch. She thinks she should be able to get away with tearing off an arm if she presents the incident correctly, but before the two could clash, the instructor for the next class had already arrived without anyone noticing. After dispelling their furious auras, the instructor with glasses and slicked back hair smiled kindly and politely asked everyone to take a seat. Neither Samuel nor Adele even sensed the instructor's entry into the room. With the instructor's arrival, the fight stopped immediately. Samuel deactivated his power without protest, although it was actually forcibly deactivated. The instructor didn't just appear out of nowhere, but he also nullified all talents within an effective radius. With that settled, it was time for the bespectacled educator to introduce himself. But for that, everyone had to return to their seats. Samuel clicked his tongue in annoyance, and Adele was surprised that the so-called rabid dog accepted the situation with only a slight annoyance. Samuel returned to his seat while the rest of the class settled down. The instructor enthusiastically introduced himself as Robot. Adele thought she now understood how that man had effortlessly nullified all magic to become an instructor at Saitan. One had to possess exceptional skill. In any fantasy world, magic is usually the first thing that comes to mind. When Adele was a novelist, she didn't describe magic as an innate talent or a latent inheritance, but as something different, more akin to a skill that could be cultivated through effort. It could even be seen as an academic discipline, depending on the perspective. Instructor Robot began his lesson with a concept that all students needed to engrave in their minds: that of attributes. The core elements of magic are earth, water, wind, and fire. To these are added the rarer ones: darkness and light, forming a total of 6 basic attributes. Most people have an affinity for only one. However, Adele felt she was in tune with 2. The Bear family was clearly inclined towards darkness, but she still didn't know what the Arson family practiced. Today's lesson would be simple. The cadets would identify their mana attributes through a quick test. They just had to place their hand on an orb, and the change in color would reveal their affinity. As the students timidly lined up, Adele decided to watch from the back. The first in line, visibly nervous, placed his palm on the orb, which glowed with a crimson hue, indicating fire. The next one was green, a sign of wind. One by one, everyone passed the test. And the class turned out to have a surprising diversity of elemental affinities. The process was fast and efficient, and soon it was Adele's turn. The robot instructor called him by his name, which was strange considering he didn't know the others personally. Still, he received the same instructions as everyone else. When Adele placed his hand on the orb, it released a dark aura with a flash of pale light. Just like everyone else in the classroom, the instructor was surprised. The robot examined the orb more closely and gasped at an extremely rare phenomenon. Half of the glow was black and the other half was gray. Logically, black represents darkness, a common attribute in high-ranking demons, but the gray hue was new even for the robot. Although it wasn't completely unknown, he knew that gray represented chaos, an attribute that defies the natural order, a true anomaly. Other than its name, the instructor had no more information about it. Adele, for his part, was completely baffled. It was the first time he had ever heard of such an attribute. He hadn't even written it in his novels. For now, it would be better to focus on the darkness attribute, as manipulating magic that defies the natural order without enough information could be disastrous. As the class continued, Adele couldn't stop thinking about that gray light that had emanated from the orb, and he wasn't the only one. The daughter of Lust had been watching him intently since before. When Adele confronted her for spying on him, she blushed, visibly embarrassed that he detected her stealth technique. She just wanted to get a little closer to ask him what he was thinking when he took such a risk. Before the instructor arrived, Laurel Fran warned him about provoking Samuel, who was basically a ticking time bomb. Adele simply stated that he's not the type to stand by while being messed with for no good reason. Laurel almost cursed him for messing with someone from one of the most notorious and powerful families in the demon world. He argued that external forces can't interfere in Satan's affairs, so status didn't really matter. But that wasn't the point Laurel was trying to make. This matter wasn't just about a conflict between demons. After a small confrontation, she almost let slip some privileged information out of frustration, but she stopped herself, sighed, and the only thing she could offer Adele was a piece of advice. He needed to be very careful from now on and watch his back. He suspected that Laurel actually wanted to warn him about the reputation of the Gluttony family, known for carrying out brutal revenge against their enemies. Anyway, with the last class of the first day, he needed to focus and get through it without any more incidents. On second thought, the last instructor on today's schedule was someone he had already met. Slamming his fist on the desk, the swordsmanship instructor Ares intimidated the cadets into submission. That burly demon insulted everyone in the room, calling them weaklings who didn't even deserve to sit in his class. He was disgusted with the results of the entrance exam, since despite facing a simple dummy with 1.5% power, all the groups, except for the top 8, were annihilated. Adele thought that Ares must be trying to provoke the class, wounding their pride. In this swordsmanship class, the instructor, Ares, aimed to ensure that the cadets were at least capable of cutting off an opponent's arm if they fell in battle. To achieve this, the first lesson would be on the importance of cardio. In other words, they would run until they collapsed. Ares believed the foundation of swordsmanship was pure, raw, physical strength. Any refined technique backed by stamina could increase its power 2 or 3 times. The time allotted for this last class kept ticking by, and the cadets were already on their 30th lap. With watchful eyes, the instructor spotted 2 cadets, Laurel and Samuel, doing something unforgivable. They were using mana to run without expending physical energy. For that, the heirs of 2 prestigious families would be punished. Their punishment would be to start the grueling race. From the beginning, Adele was pleased that those rich kids were getting what they deserved for cheating. In his day, he had to take down knights after possessing a body before escaping to the demon world. Finally, Instructor Ares gave the long-awaited signal to end the devilish class. Of course, only those who completed the 50 laps could go to their dorms. Assigned. Those who didn't finish on time would have to take extra lessons. The day was no joke, but Adele miraculously got through it with few problems. After freshening up, his next destination was the dorms. The first day had been surprisingly exhausting, and all he wanted was to find his room and get to bed as soon as possible. Unfortunately for him, Lady Renee found him as he was walking to the dorms. She seemed to have some unfinished business with her supposed bodyguard. Quickly regaining his composure, Adele asked his boss what was wrong, when he wanted to know how her first day had gone. In class, she responded with a discouraging silence. He wondered if someone had offended Renee in class or something similar. But before investigating further, he thought he should move the conversation away from prying eyes to avoid misunderstandings. Finally, the lady spoke up and voiced her complaint. In reality, she was upset because the instructors didn't give her enough training, so she wanted him to accompany her to do some cool-down exercises. Adele, who had just sweated his soul out on the field, was horrified to hear about more physical activities. Unable to say no, she led him to the personal training area for cadets that was nearby. Although it would be tough to keep up, training alongside a daughter of the 7 deadly sins made sense. Getting stronger increased his chances of survival. Upon arriving at the facility, he was surprised by how spacious and well-equipped it was. Almost all the machines were occupied and everyone was striving, seriously, to improve their physical strength. Of course, Lady Renee went straight for the heavy-duty weights. Adele volunteered to try the bar, confident that his years of training in the previous world would make this easy. He attempted a simple deadlift, but it looked like he was about to puke his guts out, and he couldn't even move the bar a single centimeter. Lady Renee bluntly called him a weakling and warned him to stop before he hurt himself. Apparently, he forgot that the original Adele Arn spent his entire life confined indoors. The lady took the bar he couldn't move and lifted it in an overhead press with total perfection and without a single drop of sweat. Even with the uniform on, she has the most deceptive physique possible in terms of pure strength. Adele is light years away from catching up to her. He needs to work hard and put some muscle on that body. The cool-down exercise she dragged him into stretched for 2 hours without a break until Renee reluctantly agreed to stop. It was already time to pack up and head back to the dorm. Overall, the wrap-up of Adele's first day was a great training sequence. Curious about how much he had progressed, he decided to take a look at his status window while Renee changed her clothes. Although he's still a chaotic half-demon, with many characteristics, a position transfer talent, and a mana count of 1,321. Despite practicing mana manipulation with discipline every night, it had only increased by 24 points, a pittance it seemed. He had entered the slowest growth phase. Maybe taking some elixirs would help. When Renee finished changing, she snapped him out of his thoughts. After escorting her to her side of the dormitory building, she kindly asked him to rest. If Adele had stayed one more second in that training center, he would have passed out. Following the instructions he was given, he went up to the upper floors of the dormitory to find his room. According to the acceptance letter, he was assigned room 407 upon reaching the 4th floor. A row of ornate doors stretched out before his eyes. Standing in front of the one with his number, Adele wondered what kind of roommate he would have to share a room with for the entire year. He silently prayed for someone good-natured, a potential ally. He was about to meet his first potential friend in the demon world, and he felt a little excited. With his heart pounding in anticipation, he opened the door with a smile and a polite greeting, but he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw who was sitting on the bed on the left side. None other than Samuel, son of Barris, the scoundrel he had gotten into trouble with, the worst person he could have possibly been paired with. Both were stunned, clearly unaware that they would be sharing the same damn room. As the initial shock wore off, the tension quickly rose, and the atmosphere filled with hostility. Miraculously, they didn't lunge at each other on the spot. They were just as annoyed to confirm that they would have to live together for the entire school year as sworn enemies. From time to time, they would glance at each other to size one another up, only to look away when their eyes met. Of course, the races kept referring to Adele as a dirty half-breed. Hearing those poisonous words, Adele sighed and shot up. Samuel also got into a stance, ready to fight at any moment. Adele isn't foolish enough to look for trouble right away. He just can't stand being in the same room as that arrogant fool, so he decided to step out for a bit. Before opening the door to leave, he wished him a peaceful rest in a grim tone. From the dark circles under his eyes, Samuel didn't even seem to sleep well in the first place. After leaving that stuffy room, Adele walked around carrying his frustration. He would come back when that fool was asleep. How is it possible that someone who doesn't even descend from wrath is so consumed by rage? Samuel is supposed to be a descendant of gluttony, right? With his thoughts in disarray, Adele found himself once again thinking about his affinity for chaos magic, the questions about that unknown attribute. Thoughts of mana wouldn't leave his mind. Maybe he should ask the Information Guild if they knew anything about it, but if they had any leads, surely the robot instructor would have already told him, or he would be learning about his power through inscriptions right now. Besides, getting information costs a lot of money, and he's as broke as the person watching this video right now. For now, the best he can do is find a place to train his mana techniques. While wandering through the forests near Saitan, Adele spotted a lone sparrow. The little bird was adorable, but there shouldn't be any creatures in this place. Adele noted this oddity with a serious and neutral expression. He turned his face without a word and continued on his way. By the time he finished his mana training, the sun had set a while ago, and night had completely fallen. Upon opening the door, he found his detestable roommate asleep in his bed. Luckily, he wouldn't have to deal with any more bad vibes. Completely exhausted, he threw himself onto his bed feeling like he could pass out at any moment. Still, he wanted to use every last second to train, including the minutes before sleep. As soon as he closed his eyes, exhaustion completely overtook him, and he fell asleep without realizing it. Sensing that the half-breed was asleep, Samuel got out of his bed and approached Adele with a malicious look. He stood there, intimidating. Watching his new roommate sleep while muttering insults about his physical appearance, something completely normal for him. What he couldn't accept was the direct offense to his family's name. He recognized that he had acted wrongly, but Samuel would rather die than apologize first. He sighed and turned away, thinking that sharing a room with that guy only added more stress to his already overwhelming life. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about Adele's performance during class when he saw that quick and decisive technique. Samuel's heart pounded hard. He felt a painful pang, a sensation he had experienced before. Remembering how the half-breed detected the instructor's vital point in an instant made him shudder uncontrollably. He could feel the call of hunger beginning to intensify. His gluttony was spiraling out of control again, causing him an atrocious and unbearable hunger. Suddenly, he felt as if his insides were drying up to an unbearable degree. At that moment, Adele moved and unconsciously turned towards his roommate right as he was dreaming, looking at Samuel's face, which was frowning in agony. On top of his uncontrollable hunger, Samuel had to see him every day with those fox-like eyes. Luckily, the night passed without any major incidents. When dawn broke, Adele got out of bed with renewed energy. He looked out the window to get some sun, but he saw something even more interesting. The same bird he had seen the day before was perched on a branch near his room. For a place so sensitive to external intrusions, Saitan really sucks at hiding its invasive intentions. This basically confirmed that someone was trying to watch him on campus. Adele would bet on Instructor Ares that guy wouldn't stop pestering him. After briefly examining the small creature's mana, he confirmed that it was definitely a living being, something that could be tamed with food. Speaking of food, that brat Samuel had blindly gone off to breakfast, not even bothering to make his bed. It was at that moment that Adele realized his huge mistake. He had no idea where the dining hall was. The time allotted for breakfast quickly ran out, and the first class of the day, under instructor idea, had already begun. Adele ended up missing breakfast while wandering around the campus looking for food. A terrible start to his second day of classes. With a serious expression, the instructor started the class with an important announcement: their group would need to choose a representative. It was only the second day, and the students barely knew each other, so naturally, questions arose about how that person would be chosen. So crucial. Initially, Instructor Idea had intended to hold a democratic vote, but changed her mind on the spot. Instead of putting it to a vote, she would appoint the representative herself. Before she could even say a name, a certain bold young lady was already preparing her acceptance speech. Laurel Fran couldn't sit still for another minute. She stood up and praised the instructor's impeccable decision-making. In the novel, the instructor chose Laurel to represent this particular class, as Samuel's unpleasant personality made him completely unsuitable for a leadership role. Laurel, on the other hand, has an extremely inflated ego as a representative. She wants everyone to treat her and call her queen. Maybe she's not the brightest, but she is undoubtedly the best choice for the position. She has the charisma of a leader and the best support skills. While she was busy claiming a position that wasn't yet hers, some of the other students thought Adele would be a competent representative until they remembered he was a half-breed. Perhaps his performance had been too good. Still, he felt flattered to hear his name mentioned for something so important. Dismissing useless thoughts, Adele silently accepted Laurel Fran's inevitable appointment. Instructor Idea remained silent, while the vivacious young woman urged her to say her name and make the nomination official. With a sigh, Idea completely shattered Laurel's overconfidence, stating clearly that she would not be the class representative. Accustomed to never being rejected or ignored in her life, Laurel couldn't process what she was hearing. Bluntly, Instructor Idea announced that the class representative she had chosen was none other than Adele. No one was more surprised than he was. This development was absurd. There had to be some hidden motive behind it. No one in their right mind would approve of a half-demon representing the entire class. Yet the instructor expressed her high expectations for the young man, hoping he would lead the group to success. After dropping that bombshell, she quickly left for another class she had to supervise. Samuel was visibly frustrated. The guy he wanted to crush just kept climbing the ranks. From now on, classes would focus intensely on practical training to prepare for the midterm exams. By the end of the day, students would have to form teams of 3. Adele searched his memory and recalled what the practical exams at a place like Saitan entailed. Most likely, they would be evaluated on their ability to kill living humans, since that is the true objective. Of all the combat training they receive, killing is fundamental. Before quickly concluding the brief class, Instructor Idea turned to Cadet Laurel with a poisonous smile and warned her to never speak to her with such confidence again, unless she wanted private lessons. Idea recognizes that keeping Laurel's ego in check is practically a requirement. The task of submitting the team roster at the end of the day falls, naturally, into the hands of the new class representative, and roster aside, no one has any idea what the upcoming practical exam will consist of. Maybe they'll fight Idea's dummies again, but if that were the case, it wouldn't make sense to form teams. In the novel's timeline, it's still too early for the terror incident in the human world. The important thing now is to form a proper and functional team. And there's already one person that Adele desperately wants to recruit. In the faculty building, one of the instructors was striding down the halls as if he had just received the worst news of his life. Instructor Aries looked ready to slap anyone who got in his way and, without knocking, burst into Idea's office, yelling at the top of his lungs in a hostile tone. Seeing how calm she was, it was clear she was already expecting this visit. It had been a while since she'd seen Aries so serious, and she even found it amusing. Aries came in storming with questions about choosing that dangerous kid as the class representative. The announcement had just been made a few hours ago, but Aries clearly had eyes and ears everywhere. Instructor Idea vehemently defended her decision. She knew perfectly well the implications of what she had just done. This will be a temporary situation, but she believes that giving Adele authority over Class A is the best thing to do right now. Aries refused to accept any absurd excuse she might have. He demanded that the choice be revoked immediately and that someone else be appointed, or there would be consequences. Even with that veiled threat, Instructor Idea stood her ground without yielding an inch. She simply rejected Aries' demand like a true professional. Aries put his hands on his head in frustration. He can make all the threats he wants, but he has no authority to act against another instructor. The thing is, in reality, he actually liked the kid. He had top-tier skills and wasn't an arrogant brat like the descendants of the 7 deadly sins. Besides, he had the backing of the Bear family. Still, Aries fully trusts his instincts. That kid can't be trusted. After all, there's nothing more dangerous than a blind blade. Instructor Idea sighed and stepped away from the argument. She'll take care of everything, so Aries better not interfere. She has supreme confidence in her ability to recognize true talent. Unable to do anything about the decision, the burly man just stood there, helpless. Now, he regrets not insisting more on taking control of that class. He has a bad feeling about leaving someone so dangerous under the supervision of a new instructor. What worries him most is that the kid reminds him of a half-demon who left an indelible scar on him in a past battle. He couldn't get the unsettling similarity between that killer and Adele out of his mind, even though the chances of a blood relation are minimal. It can't be overlooked. They don't even know what motivates that fox-eyed wolf. Aries walked to the window and whistled to call his little bird. So far, all the reports he has received are clean. Adele hasn't done anything suspicious. Just as a precaution, keeping an eye on him will be enough for now. He can't afford to look away from a potential threat, not even for a second. Meanwhile, in the Class A classroom, the cadets were busy trying to form teams during the break. Adele may be the new representative, but not a single soul has approached him. He's still worried that maybe he looks too suspicious or something like that. Even that Samuel guy is getting offers to team up. Adele doesn't really care who he groups up with, as long as they're not a hindrance. Seeing that guy being accepted so easily irritated him immensely. Since offers aren't exactly pouring in, it's about time he made an effort and approached someone himself. Just as he expected, nobody was approaching the half-demons just like him. That healer girl was also being ignored, so his first recruitment target is another half-breed. Unfortunately, the girl sees him as a sinister presence plotting something shady as he approaches with that menacing air. She almost had a heart attack. She was so tense she let out a little hiccup. It was actually Adele's fault, since he tried to scan her mana, and that must have scared her. Her mana reserve is quite deep and her healing ability is invaluable. She would be the perfect support. Putting on the most harmless smile he could muster, Adele introduced himself again. She also introduced herself as Luna. Finally, he proposed that they team up, even mentioning his position as representative, to sweeten the invitation a bit. At first, she hesitated to give him an answer, considering how scared she was and the implications of two half-demons being in the same group, so Adele applied a bit more pressure, reminding her that they didn't have much time before the team list had to be submitted. With a bit of persistence and some intimidation, he managed to get a yes out of her. As they were sealing the deal, Laurel overheard their conversation and interrupted, stepping between the two of them. With her usual haughty attitude, she chimed in with her signature laugh as if she were doing them a favor. Laurel offered to take them under her wing. Adele tried his best to refuse the persistent spoiled brat, but it was no use. Meanwhile, Luna was caught between two powerhouses arguing. Laurel stated that she still didn't recognize Adele's authority as the representative, since she considered herself the true leader of Class A. It was clear this girl wouldn't take no for an answer. So Adele ended up adding a descendant of the 7 deadly sins to his little circle. He also made her the team leader on the condition that every decision had to go through him first. It would probably be better to have this structure when dealing with Laurel, as this way he could inflate her ego while taking advantage of her influence and the prestige of her family name. A whole week went by without any major issues. By this point, Adele recognized that he had hit a plateau in his mana training. In the entire week, he only increased his reserve by a single point. He seriously needs external help, like an elixir. Plus, he still hasn't found any relevant information about the chaos attribute. His best bet is this week's magic class. And on top of that, the Kraken worm poison is becoming unstable. He'll probably have to carry that little creature with him from now on. At least, his annoying roommate isn't giving him any trouble, and that's a relief. Still, he can't help but feel that things are about to get better. That day, Instructor Idea entered the classroom with an enthusiastic greeting for her cadets. She looked excited, so something good must have happened. Then she announced that today's class would be a little special. The class would have a field training session. It would be their first class outside the classroom, and it would take place outside of Saitan. They would go to a place known as Oregon in this world. Oregon is not a state in the United States, but a prison that houses humans who failed to return to their territory during the war between humans and demons. In other words, Oregon is a prisoner of war camp. To make the trip faster, they would take the dimensional train. The students, completely clueless, were delighted to hear they would be leaving campus, having no idea what kind of place Oregon really was. If they knew what awaited them, they wouldn't be smiling so much or chatting so excitedly. For Adele, this was his first chance to leave the school grounds, and he was in luck, aside from the training. There were other ways to get stronger, and soon the protagonist would discover a special opportunity in that cursed prison. Adele had the knowledge and knew how to get to that encounter before anyone else. The problem was getting that item without raising. suspicion or attracting unwanted attention. Besides, the organ guards were no joke. His train of thought was interrupted by the cheerful Laurel. He must have looked a bit tense, so Adele laughed it off, pretending it was just nervousness about his first field class. Laurel assured him he had nothing to worry about, having such a capable team leader by his side. Adele couldn't wait to see how all that confidence and energy would evaporate once they reached Oregon, but still, the girl's attitude managed to cheer him up a bit. With a rare opportunity on the horizon, Adele was eager to get the much-needed power boost. The dimensional train's announcement notified the passengers that they had arrived in Oregon. It was time to disembark. Instructor Idea led the way, as the cadets looked up at a building. A sinister one that exuded misery. And while the kids fell silent, their instructor seemed to feel right at home. On the way to the entrance, they had to walk past several metal cages containing the bones of former prisoners. As expected, the atmosphere was intense. The cadets, who were expecting a relaxed place to train, were now trembling with fear. To calm them down a bit, Instructor Idea explained that there would be no combat tests that day, saying it as if it wasn't obvious that something terrible was about to happen. That woman had a twisted sense of humor. The Oregon Guards received the Saitan cadets with complete indifference. In Adele's estimation, the guards had to be as strong as the instructors, judging by the pressure they gave off during the verification. They were invited to follow closely. The hallway walls were adorned with torches. It looked like a medieval castle. Inside that prison camp, every imaginable stereotype was fulfilled there. As they ventured deeper into the facility, they began to hear the desperate screams of humans pleading for help and mercy. Even the ever-lively Laurel was left speechless. As they advanced, a strange odor invaded the air. Adele laughed inwardly at the cadets, who had no idea what they were getting into, just as expected. That fool Samuel didn't seem affected, not even remotely bothered. That guy is weird. Going down a stone staircase, Instructor Idea gave the signal to stop. Suddenly, the ceiling opened, and they were welcomed to the real training ground for the day. They were about to see the true face of Oregon. And it was not pretty. With the moonlight pouring in through the opening, the cadets could finally see the miserable prisoners inside their cells. For a human, that place was the closest thing to hell on Earth. As everyone could already guess, this site housed humans who had dared to attack the Demon Kingdom. They were labeled as brutal criminals with demon blood on their hands. Some had even murdered pregnant women and children. Since everyone seemed to be curious about the purpose of today's training, Instructor Idea asked one of the guards to bring a test subject. A malnourished and completely helpless prisoner knelt before her. Idea activated her magic. The threads of her power extended and enveloped the poor man with a sadistic look in her eyes. She conjured a sphere of pure misery, made of magic, and forced the prisoner's mouth open. What happened next made the cadets' stomachs churn from the brutality of the act. That was not the case for Samuel, who clearly enjoyed the bloody spectacle. The prisoner was forced to swallow the sphere, and his head twisted in a grotesque way until it became something indescribable. After a few seconds of unbearable agony, his skull exploded into pieces of flesh, blood, and brain matter. Instructor Idea had just demonstrated the extremely simple principle of this field test. The cadets must kill a human by any means they wish. Those with weaker stomachs couldn't bear to look at the aftermath of the bloody demonstration. Adele, on the other hand, felt absolutely nothing his psyche must have. Completely merged with that of the original demon that inhabited this body before him. His goal would not change no matter how dirty his hands had to get. He will survive until the end and correct the tragic outcome of this miserable world while fulfilling the original Adele's wish to test her newly appointed representative of class. Instructor Idea called on Adele to execute the task without saying a word. He approached the nearest cell and opened the door to choose his victim. Chained against the wall was another emaciated prisoner of war. Understanding what was about to happen, the poor man looked at Adele's dagger with terror. In a cold and emotionless tone, the young man offered him a few words of courtesy, giving him the chance to say his last words. Filled with hatred and venom, the man screamed that his only regret in life was not having killed more demonic insects, and warned that humanity would wipe out all demons. Listening to the ravings of a madman filled with hatred, fueled the clean and swift cut of Adele's blade. Knowing he was eliminating someone like that gave him a strangely comforting satisfaction. When he left the cell, Instructor Idea applauded his flawless execution. The instructor and the class representative had already done their part. Now it was the rest's turn to enter their assigned cells and stain the floor with human blood. As for the half-demons in the class, they had to step aside with the instructor. For a moment, Adele watched as Idea led them to the other side of the complex. He never imagined there was another half-breed in the class besides him and Luna. Speaking of Luna, she clearly didn't seem fit for such a brutal test. It turns out that Instructor Idea had prepared special prisoners designated for the half-demons, instead of killing humans like the rest. They had to end the life of another half-demon. This way they could prove they weren't traitors to their demonic blood, like the wretches in that line. Seeing the traitorous demons who sided with the humans when the war broke out, many of the half-demon cadets felt their blood boil. They had suffered and been persecuted for the disloyal actions of others like them. Instead of using weapons for a cleaner kill, the half-breed cadets used their fists and feet to mercilessly beat the deserters. Adele watched and listened to the cracking of bones and the helpless pleas from the other side of the prison. Samuel led the charge, summoning his gluttonous manifestation to devour his human prey. The sounds and stench of death filled the air. While Luna tried to mentally block out the depravity, Samuel didn't even need to kill with such brutality. But that guy is a real sicko. Adele was worried that if Instructor Idea noticed Luna cracking under the pressure, the poor girl would be in serious trouble. As for Laurel Fran, she asked if using her abilities to kill would count as a pass. Idea gave her the green light and chose a cell with victims. She brought out 2 prisoners and put one of them in a magical trance. With full control, she ordered him to kill. The enchanted prisoner turned to his lifelong comrade and strangled him to death. Idea gave Laurel her approval and reminded her that she still had many things to correct over time. The girl didn't seem to lack a latent hatred for humans, but she was much more fragile than Adele had thought. Since they were facing chained prisoners, it didn't take them long to get their first kill. Now, only one cadet remained who hadn't done her part: Luna. With total and undivided focus on the poor young woman, she had to prove to Idea that she was not a traitor to her kind. If she couldn't complete this training, there were much broader implications due to her lineage. All Luna wanted at that moment was to disappear. She fell to her knees on the ground and cursed herself for being so pathetic. Luna had come all the way to Saitan to avenge her mother, who had lived a hellish life because of a man who didn't deserve to be called a father, yet she couldn't even overcome her own paralysis now that she was struggling. Adele stepped in to offer her the help she so desperately needed, rolled up his sleeves, and swore that she would pass this test. Luna felt apprehensive. But the young woman had already drawn her dagger to begin. She turned the blade and placed it in her hands. It was scary, but she had to push through that fear with determination. With the dagger in her hand, Adele gently guided her with skill. In that state, all she had to do was move forward slowly and stab the heart. She closed her eyes and did as she was told. Before she knew it, Adele was already taking the dagger from her hand and patting her head for a job well done. If she hadn't intervened, things would have ended much worse. It was obvious that nothing good would happen if a demon half-breed refused to kill a filthy human. Best case scenario, she would be expelled. Worst case, she could face a very painful fate. After helping Luna, Instructor Idea expressed her disgust at seeing that the class representative had overstepped. She was clearly furious with Adele for interfering. There was no way Idea would give the girl a pass after such a pitiful performance. However, Adele argued that Idea had established a rule that using a skill to kill a human was enough to pass. Cadet Luna was the only one among them with healing abilities, something more suited for a support role, and that's why she was more valuable than many of the cadets who did pass. With that logic, Adele was implying that she would abandon other cadets with insufficient talent without a problem. She said it with complete confidence and assured her she would do exactly that. Instructor Idea was quite pleased with her answer, since she liked how bold the class representative was, so she let the situation slide and gave Luna a pass. This time she was lucky that Idea was a complete psychopath instead of a traditional instructor. If the one in charge of the exam had been Aries, her approach wouldn't have worked. When Instructor Idea left, and Adele congratulated her for passing, Luna's nerves finally gave out and she fainted. Come to think of it, Luna losing consciousness fit perfectly into Adele's next plan. It was time to start the real game and search for what she had really come to find. She knows the layout of Oregon like the back of her hand, and there was still time before returning to Satan against the explicit orders to stay close to the rest of the class. She ventured even deeper into the depressing prison. As expected, the security became tighter the further she went. She needed something miraculous to descend into the underground areas. Figuring it was worth a shot, she wrapped her entire body in pure darkness. Thanks to her improvements in mana control, she was able to pull it off. With her body hidden in darkness, infiltrating the prison's underground passage became just barely possible. Moving with the utmost care, Adele slipped through the blind spots of the patrolling guards. Getting too close, she had to step back and hide upon sensing hostility. Adele's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't afford to be discovered now. Luckily, the guard only did a quick check before moving on. That intimidating guy must have sensed the subtle change in the atmosphere. As expected of an Oregon guard, after getting past the most dangerous parts of the prison, she finally found the only empty cell on the entire first floor. If her memory served her right, the secret passage had to be hidden inside. Using position transfer, she easily opened the cell's lock as soon as she set foot inside the four-sided cage. The pressure mechanism on the floor was triggered. He struggled to stay upright and prevented any sound from escaping as he fell down a seemingly bottomless pit. His best hope of landing without dying was to rely on his rough knowledge of how deep the protagonists went in the novel. After mentally counting for a few seconds, he threw his dagger downward. As soon as Adele heard the sound of the blade hitting the ground, he used position transfer to swap places. By doing so, he cheated the laws of physics and landed without a single scratch or sound. The first part was done. Now he had to cross the underground water channel, where he expected to encounter a spawn zone for toxic black slimes. Their poison is highly lethal on contact. In that case, he chose to aim for their cores from a safe distance. Fortunately, he had the Fang of Darkness, a long-range black blade that fires a shower of blades. Each of the dark mana blades struck the slime's cores with perfect precision. Black slimes are annoying and lethal, but they aren't a big problem when you exploit their obvious weak point. Upon reaching the edge of the underground channel, he had to delve even deeper beneath the disgusting, viscous black substance. Without hesitation, he dove into the murky liquid, hoping he wouldn't run out of air halfway through. Suddenly, he heard an ominous voice. It spoke in his head, telling him not to proceed, for a great evil awaited him. Adele never wrote anything about that voice, or about this warning in his novel. As far as he knows, he's heading to a place where a demon was put to sleep, one that rebelled centuries ago. The great evil it spoke of could be the beast that not even the Demon King could control and had to seal. Whatever the case, he's come too far to turn back now. All that's left is to see what awaits beyond the light. After what felt like an eternity beneath the black substance, he swam desperately to the surface of a hidden chamber. In front of him were the remains of a chained prisoner that had decomposed into a skeleton. Looking at the macabre sight, Adele realized the opportunity must be hidden inside that skeleton's rotten heart. Excited by the treasure before him, Adele reached for the rotten heart, only to stop dead in his tracks. When he got close enough, the decaying heart glowed with an intense and vibrant crimson light. The light from the heart seemed to pump life back into the remains of the sealed prisoner. Adele never expected something so absurd to happen. With new life flowing through the skeleton, its eyes ignited with golden fire. A cross-shaped emblem appeared. Behind the deteriorated prisoner, bearing an unsettling resemblance to the Arsen family emblem tattooed on Adele's neck, this meant that the legendary traitor of the demon realm was connected to his family after all. Defying all logic, the skeleton spoke in a thunderous voice, recognizing Adele as a child of Arsen. Uneasy and curious, he listened in. Anyone who can hear the skeleton's voice is destined to carry the same burden he bore in life. That is the fate of the blood that carries chaos. For Adele, it left a warning: do not let yourself be devoured by the rampant chaos. That force which distorts the order of the world. If one becomes obsessed with finding its meaning, they will inevitably become lost in the end. After issuing that chilling warning, its remains crumbled to dust as the rotten heart fell to the ground. Upon touching and picking up the decaying organ, it lit up again, transmitting a constant hunger through his palm. The will that seeks nothing but absolute devastation and destruction. He must have touched the vestiges of its ancestors' deepest desires. Looking at his status window, a new trait appeared: telekinesis. Eager to test it out a bit, he pulled out his dagger and tried to move it with his mind. Unfortunately, all he can do for now is lift it into the air for a few seconds. It's not a problem of lacking mana, but of low dexterity. Still, he will have to train this new skill diligently. Aside from this potentially massive technique, discovering a clue about the chaos affinity beyond simple raw power was unexpected. This stealthy operation was a great success, since there was nothing left to gain in this damp hole. Adele had to return to the rest of the class before anyone noticed his absence. Upon arriving, the first one to see him was Laurel, and her expression was suspicious. Using the simplest excuse, he claimed he was just taking a walk around the area. Well, to cover his tracks, he insisted that seeing caged humans was curiously pleasant for him. Ignoring Laurel's irritating complaints, he looked for Luna. Fortunately, she seemed much better than the last time he saw her. He joked that she slept so soundly that anyone could have taken her away without anyone noticing. Ignoring the joke, Luna thanked Adele for helping her in the field test. Without him, she would have undoubtedly failed. That means the girl now owes him a favor, and he will, without a doubt, collect that debt in the future. Finally, Instructor Idea called her cadets to gather. Luckily, there were no casualties in today's field exercise. She also noticed the change many cadets had undergone after getting their hands dirty. They still need to be polished, but today there was great improvement. It was a short stay that felt long, and now it was time to leave that cursed place and return to Saitan. Another week passed quietly since they returned from that unforgettable trip. Not much changed, but Adele noticed that the demon half-breeds had overcome some of their fears, thanks to the experience of killing their own kind. Meanwhile, Adele's every free second has been dedicated to training his telekinesis, while the professors dropped hints about the midterm exam. In the novel, the first-year students of Saitan launched an all-out invasion against the Imperial School right around this time. This upcoming event is no joke. Adele could see that not everyone in this classroom would return in one piece. Today, Luna kept glancing at him and looking away when he looked back. From her expression, it seemed like something was bothering her, so he decided to approach with a smile to find out what was wrong. She didn't respond, so he gave her a little scare when he asked if something was wrong. She nervously waved her hands to deny everything. It seems she's not willing to share her thoughts so easily, so Adele invited her to have lunch later. Hearing the invitation seemed to cheer her up quite a bit. That said, they agreed to meet in front of the dining hall at noon. Luna is emotionally unstable, but too easy to read. She doesn't seem to be as scared as before anymore, and she seems to trust Adele after what happened in Oregon. A few hours later, lunch was almost over and Luna still hadn't shown up, which worried Adele. He didn't want to go in and eat alone. Since he normally doesn't even eat lunch, there was nothing to do, so he thought it would be better to use that time to train more. Just as he was heading back to his dorm, Adele saw Lady Renee and Diana, the Demon King's daughter, walking towards him. Upon seeing the most dangerous duo in all of Aton, every fiber of Adele's being screamed at him to run and not get involved, so he hastily used position transfer to hide. Still, Lady Renee sensed a faint trace of his presence. Luckily, she didn't investigate the area further, as he was just hiding behind some bushes. Considering what he went through in Oregon, he was now a bit more paranoid about being discovered as a descendant of the Arsen family. Not only did his family play a key role in defeating the Demon Kingdom, but they were also directly responsible for the brutal death of the Demon King. To make matters worse, the Arsens even added the Queen to their list of victims. While the two women tried to figure out the presence they had both just sensed, Adele silently slipped away. It was a very close call. He really needs to be more cautious on campus. His stealthy wanderings led him to a hidden corner behind the dining hall. The wide open space and silence were much better for training than his stuffy room. Maybe he had found a decent spot. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last long, as a frightened scream echoed nearby. Adele recognized the terrified voice and immediately ran in that direction. His suspicions were confirmed. Luna was being harassed in an alley. Seeing the young woman being ganged up on made Adele's blood boil to dangerous levels. She turned to him with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Calming himself, Adele scanned the aggressors and recognized them. They were classmates of his. He could pretty much understand what was happening there. With barely contained rage in his voice, he told the bullies to go back to the classroom. They were harassing Luna when everyone there was also a demon half-breed. The group's leader confronted him. From the beginning, these hybrids had never recognized Adele's authority as the class representative. These guys were completely out of their league, believing Adele wouldn't be able to handle a 3-on-1 fight. They were quickly proven wrong. Using pure mana imbued with killing intent, Adele grabbed the bully and choked him without lifting a single finger. The other two were bewildered as they felt the representative's overwhelming hostility. Those fools had the nerve to confront him when they couldn't even move after feeling just a little bit of his killing intent. He let him drop to the ground, looking down on the pathetic worm. To Adele's surprise, it seems he underestimated one of the bullies who was standing on the sidelines. The boy with the spider mark on his cheek wasn't afraid of him. In fact, he was calmly analyzing his movements. After making an example of one of them, Adele urged them to stop making fools of themselves and run away, hearing them continue to talk trash. Adele issued one last warning, a chance for them to shut up. It was still lunchtime and they'd prefer not to see their own guts before eating. Limping, the three fools retreated with their tails between their legs. The boy with the spider tattoo remained calm and composed, watching Adele cautiously. That composure was unusual for a cadet, aside from Luna. Maybe there was another diamond in the rough in Class A. Once the bullies left, Luna ran to her savior with sincere gratitude for helping her. Since they took too long, their pending lunch would have to wait for another time. Class would be starting soon, so it was better to hurry back. Adele had heard they would finally start learning real magic that day and didn't want to be late. Day by day, Luna felt more and more attached to her fox-eyed knight. A few minutes later, Instructor Robot entered the classroom and excitedly announced that they would finally begin learning magic for real-life scenarios. Today's focus would be on invisibility and silence, two techniques that shouldn't fall into the hands of bad people. Coincidentally, those two were the original Adele's specialties. The purpose of learning these spells was simple: how to face someone stronger on the battlefield. Sometimes the only answer is assassination. For some, such dirty methods are not an option, but a necessity. At this moment, no cadet in Class A could defeat a human hero in direct combat. To begin, Robot first demonstrated invisibility magic. He carefully explained how to slowly heat up their demonic tattoo while circulating and gradually releasing mana. Even with a low level of mana purity, one had to try to spread the coverage thinly and evenly, all over the body. Failing to do so would result in failure. After executing each step of the process with absolute perfection, the instructor seemingly vanished without a trace. That must explain why no one noticed when Robot entered during his fight with Samuel. Reappearing in the same spot where he had vanished, the instructor ordered the cadets to envelop their bodies with mana. First, they had to close their eyes and dedicate all their concentration to the difficult and precise handling of mana. This step would take time, so patience was required. Even if they got it right by accident after a few tries, the caster should still be able to see their own body. Each cadet tried their best to dedicate all their mental energy and mana control to the task. Robot estimated that it would probably take more than a day for any of these brats to achieve any hint of success. One of the standouts was Laurel Fran. She had a deep mana reserve and good control, as expected from a daughter of the 7 deadly sins. Even more impressively, the boy known for his impulsiveness, Samuel, was demonstrating an astonishing level of control. His body was already beginning to turn faint. You must have a natural talent for the technique. For normal cadets, a week of practice was the threshold to begin understanding the complexities of invisibility. Laurel and Samuel were already at a prodigy level. As Instructor Robot was praising the privileged kids, he realized that one of the cadets most outstanding was not in the classroom, the boy with the chaos attribute that Ares had warned him about. Looking at Adele's seat, he noticed the boy's physical form had already completely disappeared. He clearly remembered him sitting there when the lesson began. While the instructor was having a mental breakdown, Adele was easily maintaining his invisibility spell, without much effort, thanks to his body's latent talent. Invisibility magic was too easy for him to master. In fact, he was already trying to find ways to incorporate his chaos attribute into it. The invisibility and assassination skills covered today were not enough against those who were truly powerful. He needed a much more lethal way to kill. While heading back to his dorm, Adele was stopped by Instructor Robot in the hallway. The instructor just wanted to know if he had practiced magic before entering Saitan. Seeing that there was no harm in it, he admitted that it was his first time as a magic practitioner, but that he had always been able to use his innate talents. Realizing he had a generational talent in front of him, Instructor Robot invited Adele to visit his lab from time to time. He praised the young man for his exceptional potential in magic and for the as-yet unexplored possibilities of his rare chaos attribute. He was practically overflowing with research value. Adele might be supremely talented in assassination, but it wouldn't hurt him to explore other paths. Since he had other plans for that day, he promised to go to Robot's lab another time. Maintaining the facade of a magic genius would also help improve his campus life a bit. Sitting in his dorm room, Adele needed to take care of something before the midterm exams began. To do so, he needed a technique beyond simple invisibility. Since Samuel wasn't around, it was the perfect time to practice. If events matched his novel, then there must be a human spy hidden in the demon realm. He couldn't risk being discovered by that person. Adele needed to find and eliminate that scoundrel, whatever the cost. A high-level spy would be incredibly difficult to handle, so mastering his secret card was key. Going beyond simple invisibility, his intention was to exist and not exist at the same time. With the perfect integration of his compatible attributes and his solid grasp of the original invisibility magic, he succeeded in just a few attempts. It worked. In fact, it worked so well that not even he could see himself. As his presence and existence faded, Adele felt a dark premonition. Maybe he had overdone it with the non-existence part and now he was starting to have trouble breathing. His body felt strange and his instincts were telling him to dispel the dangerous magic immediately. When trying to disperse the mana, he discovered he couldn't force its deactivation. He had to do it now, or he would disappear forever, focusing every ounce of his being on regaining control of his mana. He managed to dispel the modified invisibility after a great struggle in that state. His sense of time and all his senses were distorted. It was a truly terrifying sensation to be out of control. On top of that, his mana was severely drained, which made it even harder to stop his erasure. If he hadn't held on with everything he had, he would have been lost in absolute nothingness. This experience made him understand why his ancestor warned him about being devoured by the power of chaos. Still, he couldn't give up on such a promising secret card. A completely new technique that combined a well-known spell with the chaos attribute. It would be a lethal weapon in his hands. He would call it absolute invisibility. Out of nowhere, while he was panting from exhaustion, his damn roommate burst into the room and kicked him with all his might. Samuel was shouting at him fervently, but Adele couldn't understand a single word. Now that he thought about it, he couldn't hear his own voice either. The worst-case scenario crept into his mind. Could it be that he had lost his hearing? When things calmed down in the dormitory and his hearing returned, Adele opted to continue training his new technique on the outskirts of Saitan. This time, he had better control of absolute invisibility, fortunately. The feedback didn't cost him his hearing this time. Instead, it cost him his sight. Now, he's sure that using absolute invisibility comes with the price of losing one or two of his senses. He has been testing and adjusting the spell for a week, and he's already experienced the loss of hearing, taste, touch, and now sight. Luckily, the side effect only lasts for about 2 hours each time. The bad thing is that he can't foresee or choose which senses he'll lose. As it stands now, the technique can only be safely used for about 3 seconds. In other words, it's practically useless. A high-risk, low-reward technique is no good. Maybe it could unleash its true potential if he can guarantee a kill with it, aside from practicing absolute invisibility. He also tried to combine his chaos attribute with other traits without success. The most direct path to getting stronger right now is through swordsmanship and mana control training. Without his vision, he was stuck in the forest for 2 hours, unable to see. Since he'd already made this a morning habit, he shouldn't be late for class. Later today, the class was under the tutelage of the strict instructor Ares. After regaining his sight, Adel was forced to get in line and run as if his life depended on it. Weeks have passed, and all they've done in this class is cardio, instead of learning the way of the sword. After a grueling physical training session, Ares ordered the cadets to assemble. As the class representative, Adel had already adapted to the role of relaying the instructor's orders to his peers. Of course, this always irritated the blockhead of the group, who was still resentful that Adel had been appointed to such a crucial role. After clearing his throat, Instructor Ares announced that they would start reducing the physical training time to begin with real swordsmanship lessons. Adel wasn't the only cadet happy to hear that the running would be reduced. Today's swordsmanship lesson would begin with a demonstration. Unsheathing his sword, Instructor Ares called the class representative to step forward. Adel had no choice but to obey. Ares rudely asked him if he was already able to channel mana into his sword. He answered truthfully that he could. Ares sternly ordered him to go all out with his mana sword and try to launch an attack. As a handicap, the instructor would not use any mana, only brute force. Knowing that vengeful fool, he was clearly trying to set up a scene to humiliate Adel. Before going on the attack, he made sure that Ares would only use his sword with that condition set. Adel drew his trusty dagger. He could use mana, but using his innate abilities would be overkill. For now, he wanted to test the waters and see the instructor's skill level. From the first moment, he could tell that the man's stance had no openings that he could exploit. In the human world, he'd be at an advanced expert level, more or less. But in the demon realm, sword skills are judged mainly by how much magical energy can be channeled through the weapon. Human ranks don't mean much in this world. First of all, channeling. Imbuing a weapon with mana is no easy task. Adel could see that the instructor was underestimating his abilities, and that hurt his pride a little. If that was the case, he just needed to exceed expectations, dashing forward like a loosed arrow. He aimed for the neck, seeking a lethal blow to the right carotid artery. Of course, that is easier said than done. Shifting his angle, Ares easily sidestepped. Then the second part of Adel's assault began. By twisting the handle of the blade, he circled the instructor with a quick follow-up attack, confident he would land a critical hit. Ares looked at him with disdain and insulted his unfinished technique. The instructor flexed his massive muscles and received the dagger's attack without raising his guard. Then he launched a brutal counterattack to his spine that left Adel sprawled on the ground. His fellow cadets watched as Ares used excessive force in a simple demonstration. The impact of Adel's landing left a large crater in the training area. He coughed and gasped, searching for air with his lungs collapsed by the merciless counterattack. Without stopping, Ares raised his sword, seemingly aiming for the cadet's neck from the killing intent he was exuding. Adel could feel death approaching. From the crowd, Luna shouted his name in concern. With one hand raised, holding the heavy sword over his head, Ares launched the strike, with a force destined to cause devastation once more. The impact destroyed the training ground floor. Even Samuel could tell that this was too violent for a simple swordsmanship lesson. Fortunately, Adel had just enough time to imbue his body with mana and roll out of the impact's range thanks to telekinesis. He managed to deflect the sword at the exact right moment to survive such a savage attack. If he had been a little slower or faster, he would have been split in two. Ares felt the disturbance on his sword. Adel stood up and confronted the brute for trying to kill a cadet for no reason at all. Ares pulled the dagger embedded in his chest out as if it were nothing and calmly refuted the accusations. He threw Adel's blade to the ground and ordered him to go back to his place and shut up. Afterward, the despicable instructor asked the class representative how it felt to fight against someone of his level in a direct confrontation. Adel did not beat around the bush and stated that what had just happened was a tactic used by the weak, elaborating on his answer. He explained that he was allowed to use mana, but that the enemy self-imposed limitations according to his analysis. Ares must have been trying to show the class that the only way for a weak person to defeat someone stronger is by being willing to sacrifice themselves to damage the enemy. In his opinion, Ares could have easily dodged his final attack, but he chose to take the hit as if he had planned it from the very beginning. To everyone's surprise, Aries gave Adele credit for having come up with the right answer. He wants to instill in these cadets that the human world is full of terrifyingly powerful individuals, and that it is almost impossible to defeat them without making risky plays. Demons must resort to luring these titans into complacency, and when the situation demands it, they must boldly expose their weakness to land a surprise attack. What they teach is not the noble art of swordsmanship. In the real world and in real wars, such things do not exist. Aries will never teach his cadets elegant swordsmanship, only the one that allows them to win. In fact, from now on, they won't be limited to swords. This will basically be a weapons class. He's telling them that death doesn't matter as long as they achieve victory. Aries is implanting this idea with the midterm exams in mind. By now, the instructors at the Human Imperial School must be on high alert. The human spy must have already leaked the current situation at Saitan. In the novel, the Saitan cadets drop like flies, while the Imperial School students get out unscathed. It's likely that Aries suspects Adele is the spy. To clear his name, he must first find and eliminate the rat. After such an explosive demonstration, Instructor Aries dismissed the cadets, while the others returned to the classroom in an orderly fashion. Adele remained in his place. Aries looked at him with annoyance and asked if he planned to rebel over what had happened earlier. Of course, Adele denied such a ridiculous idea with a smile, but as soon as the instructor turned his back, his veiled hostility burned intensely. He couldn't trust someone who suspected him of being a spy. Aries also detested the murderous and ruthless side that Adele had shown since the first day, but he couldn't help it. He had fully embraced that aspect of himself. Besides, that killer instinct was essential to gain the authority and status needed to suppress the power of the 7 deadly sins. Of course, if Aries continued to cross the line like he did on the training field, Adele would do everything in his power to make that meathead face the consequences as he plotted his revenge against one of the instructors. Luna approached him and sensed some of his killing aura leaking out. He apologized for scaring her again. It wasn't his intention this time. She had only come over to make up for the last time they couldn't have lunch together. Maybe today would be the day. Adele immediately accepted, and his face lit up with excitement. Inside the dining hall, they ordered luxurious meals fit for aristocrats. It had been a long time since he'd eaten something so refined. Well, actually, it had been a long time since he'd had lunch at all. There were so many delicious dishes spread across the table that leaving any leftovers might provoke the punishment of the demonic god of gluttony. Just as they were about to start eating, the group of fools Adele had beaten up walked in. They noticed Adele and Luna, but didn't even think about causing trouble with the class representative right there. Adele greeted them with a smile, and the 3 stooges decided not to cause any trouble, unlike the other 2. The Spider Boy was still fascinated with Adele. This seemed like a good time for Adele to ask Luna what really happened with those 3. She confessed that she had been getting bullied by the other demon half-breeds, though she didn't know why. They just started picking on her at some point. She blamed herself for being weak and not having any special physical abilities. Maybe she doesn't realize how valuable her healing power really is. Luna added that the 3 of them never physically assaulted her, but they would insult her in passing and every now and then steal her silver coins. Hearing that she had been enduring such a miserable situation, Adele advised her to stick close to him from now on. Luna claimed she didn't need protection. She just had to prove she wasn't a traitor to the demons, but that was precisely all the more reason for them to stick together. Since he was already planning to investigate, Adele asked Luna what she knew about the boy with the spider tattoo. According to Luna, the boy's name is Kyle. Hearing that name triggered a memory for Adele. Someone named Kale had been mentioned in the novel. Upon asking more questions, she discovered that Kale was a pure-blooded demon, but he hung out with the group of demon half-breeds. In Luna's eyes, that boy was especially terrifying. He looked at her as if she were a disgusting insect. Wasn't that exactly how they looked at humans in Oregon? Yes. Kale had just positioned himself at the top of Adele's list of suspects. For a moment, she thought about consulting the information paper to confirm, but maybe it would be a waste of money. She didn't need any more headaches. It would be better to check directly. After all, she already had enough relevant information about the spy, so Adele got up from her seat and approached the table of the 3 fools with a polite greeting. Immediately, they reacted with a mix of fear and hostility, while Kale remained indifferent, looking casual. Adele mentioned that she had heard about a first-year girl from the Imperial Academy. Kale remained seated, focused on the food in front of him. Adele added that the girl was a demon half-breed with only one living relative, an older brother. At that moment, she could feel Kale seething in his seat. To provoke a reaction from the suspected spy in a sinister tone, Adele dropped the girl's name, Ray. In that instant, Kale must have realized that his cover had been blown and that Adele was a much bigger problem than he had anticipated.